Authority figures, respected members of our community.
Hi, I'm Stoughton Deputy Police Chief Robert Devine.
Ones that are supposed to be trusted.
This is Deputy Police Chief Robert Devine, and he's going to read you
Oh, the places you'll go.
Let's give him a hand.
They serve and protect, but we know by now that some of them don't.
We take an oath to protect and serve our community and its people. You are held to a higher standard. These men violated their oaths and they are unfit to serve as police officers.
Some people who sport a shiny badge use their position of power for evil. And sadly, this is one of those stories. A story of a young girl who desperately yearned for a father figure, who admired police and those who serve our country in the military. Her only mistake was trusting them, and it cost her innocence and ultimately her life. This is Sandra Birchmore's story. Deadly Deep Dives. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and if you've never been here before, I am Kimbyrleigha. It's nice to finally meet you. And for those of you that have been here before, you might be a little bit surprised that I'm covering a current case that is in the media right now. It's true, I don't think I've ever covered a current case on this channel, but there are a few reasons why this case in particular is one that I want to bring more awareness to. Not only am I a mother of not one but two daughters, but my dad is from Canton, Massachusetts, where this case takes place. So of course, this is much more personal for me. Canton is also where the Karen Reed case took place. And guess what? There are some overlapping players in this case and in that one, which I will be discussing throughout this video because the corruption that is speculated to be rampant in this particular police department, it needs to be highlighted as much as possible. And I want to use my platform to keep cases like this being talked about. So without further ado, please let me introduce my sponsor for today. Sponsors help make videos like this possible. I want to thank my sponsor, Fume, for supporting my channel. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device. It's not a vape, there's no nicotine, and it's not addictive. Fume fills the void because when you're ditching a bad habit, you still have something to reach for. We all have bad habits, but my husband, John, well, one of his was a little bit harder to kick, especially when you have idle hands, you're under a lot of stress, or you're out with your friends and you see everyone else reaching for their bad habit. It's hard not to just give in and ask to borrow one of theirs. But guess what? We found a better alternative that helps you kick your bad habit in an enjoyable way. Something you can take out with you, and I've even tried it, and I have to say, I like it. It tastes good. And it feels really cool too. It's also great if you like to fidget like I do. It helps calm anxiety with magnets, snaps, and clicks. Fume has lots of delicious flavors to choose from, like crisp mint and orange vanilla. My favorite is the raspberry lemon. With flavored air, you can satisfy your oral fixation through a passive diffusion system that utilizes no electronics, vapor, or combustion. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, use my code Kimbyrleigha to get your free topper, and it's the perfect accessory for your Fume device. Slip it onto the mouthpiece for a softer, warmer feel. It's chewable for those of you who love to fidget, and it's reusable. Head to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com and use my code Kimbyrleigha or scan the QR code on the screen to get your free Fume topper when you order your journey pack today. And thanks again to Fume for sponsoring today's video. I've got a disclaimer. All the information I've gathered has come from official legal records consisting of Massachusetts State Police investigations, police reports, affidavits, indictments, and lawsuits regarding this matter. And this case is still currently under investigation, and the parties charged with crimes have yet to be convicted or face trial. Therefore, everything is alleged at this point, and the individuals spoken about are presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. Now, let's begin. Sandra Marie Birchmore was born on May 13th of 1997. She was raised by her mother, Denise McCain Birchmore. Sandra's biological father was never part of her life. Sandra's grandmother, Grace McCain, stepped in to help Denise care for her, but sadly, tragedy would strike this family when Grandma Grace passed away when Sandra was only 4 years old. Fortunately, Grace's sister, Aunt Claire, stepped up and served as a grandmotherly figure in Sandra's life to help her mom raise her. Sandra and Claire developed a very strong bond, and she actually called Claire her grandma. Claire's husband, Gerald, served in World War II in the U.S. Army, and he was a proud recipient of the Good Conduct Medal, the Victory Medal, the American Campaign Medal, and the European African Middle Eastern Campaign Medal, with 3 Bronze Stars. So I think it goes without saying that Gerald was very patriotic, he was a proud American, and dedicated to serving his country. This would be one of Sandra's first male role models. The family lived in Stoughton, Massachusetts, where Sandra was raised. With both her uncle and her stepdad being in the military, little Sandra grew up with an immense respect for those who dedicated their lives serving our country. It was part of her family values, so it would be no surprise when Sandra's family decided to enroll her in a police youth program when she was only 8 years old. The program was called Respect. Now, I'm assuming, since there wasn't much about it online at this point, that it served as a way to introduce children to rules, laws, and law enforcement to instill strong moral code and values in them. This appeared to possibly be a part of the Stoughton Police Explorers program, which I will get into in a moment. It aims to introduce young people to careers in law enforcement and is designed to foster an interest in police work and potentially help recruit future officers when kids become eligible as adults. Now, a year later, at the age of 9, Sandra attended a 14-week strengthening program for high-risk families. And I found this newspaper article that outlined the purpose of this local program. It was designed to increase resilience and reduce risk factors for substance abuse, depression, violence, and aggression and delinquency in schools in high-risk 6 to 11-year-old children and 13 to 17-year-old children and their parents. It's a behavioral and cognitive skills training program founded by a group called OASIS, which stands for Organizing Against Substances in Stoughton. At first, I thought it was pretty interesting that little Sandra would be attending this program, but as I researched even more, I realized it was really geared towards parents learning skills to raise their children in supportive households. It's for families that have been through tough times. And I'm assuming with the death of her husband and then her mother, Denise thought this would be helpful for her and Sandra. Denise was actually quoted in this newspaper article saying that she and Sandra attended the program with 9 other local families. Denise said, quote, "I like the fact that they showed you what your tools are. For example, instead of yelling at your child, sit down and talk it out. If you're both angry, instead of trying to work out the situation right then, take a time out and then come back and deal with it." End quote. Sandra even gave her perspective. She said it was great because all the kids got to play fun games and put on puppet shows while learning different skills. She said, quote, "It was really fun. And the very last day, we got a certificate." End quote. While the families were there, they also got served dinner during the workshop, and they met for 2.5 hours for 14 weeks. They joined the very same program back in September of 1997, when Matthew and William were only 12 years old, just like Sandra. However, the Farwell brothers were known to have disciplinary issues while attending school, but they seemed to thrive in this program and were planning on becoming police officers. All 3 of these men became mentors to Sandra. Sandra's mom, Denise, and grandmother figure Claire were increasingly proud of her interest in the police academy, and they were supportive of her joining the Explorers. Kids that participated learned all about law enforcement as a career. They would do things like ride-alongs with officers, and these officers would also serve as mentors to these children and teens. The Explorers program is actually a co-ed version of the Boy Scouts. It includes older teens, and it often focuses on a particular specialty, like law enforcement in this case. The leader, Robert Devine, was quoted saying that he breaks in the cadets in this program, and he knows all about how to do it because he was a drill instructor in the military. He said, "I'm giving them a taste of what they can expect," although he admitted to scaling it back a bit for the students, his words. Topics at the academy included basic things like physical fitness and discipline, but the organization also delved into criminal and constitutional law, self-defense, and even forensics. You know, it kind of sounds fun. It sounds like something a lot of us would be interested in because we have a keen interest in true crime. I think it would especially be appealing to young people. Robert said that many of the kids simply find a home in the Explorers, saying that a lot of times it's more about that than actually training for a career in law enforcement. He said, "We have some great kids come through the program, and I'm going to tell you right now that Sandra, she was a really great kid. Even with her struggles that she had to overcome, she was funny, she was kind, and she was a selfless young lady. But of course, she was also very impressionable, like many young people are. By 2012, both Matthew and his brother William became full-blown instructors with the Police Explorers, which I'm just going to refer to as the Explorers going forward. Sadly, that is the same year that Sandra's uncle Gerald passed away. So she really was lacking a strong male role model in her life. And these men and the Explorers, they really seemed to step up and be there for her. All of them took an interest in Sandra. And I wish I meant that in an innocent way, but the truth is, she was being groomed from the very beginning. It's hard to imagine that this could be true, but there's proof. And it's very disheartening to know that men like this exist. Men who claim to abide by an oath when they become decorated leaders in our communities. That there are men like this that prey on our children. I'm sure that no one in Sandra's family could have imagined that they'd have to worry about her while she was in the hands of police officers. Literally. I think it's important to know more about these men before I dive into how they connected this case. I'm going to start with Robert Devine. I'll try to make this as easy to follow as possible because there is a lot of information in this case. Robert Devine joined the Stoughton Police Department in 1999 and began volunteering with the Explorers program when it was then being run by Chief Manuel Cachopa. From 2001 to 2004, Robert served as a school resource officer, and it was during that time in 2002 when Chief Cachopa ordered Robert to take over as the leader of the Explorers program. From 2004 to 2006, Robert served as sergeant of the Stoughton Police Department, and in 2006, he became a lieutenant. Now, it was around this time he met Police Academy cadet Lisa Linsky. Robert was her squad leader. Lisa graduated with a degree in criminal justice from Curry College and eventually graduated from the police academy and became a police officer. She and Robert ended up getting married, and they had a daughter named McKenna. And by 2008, Robert had been promoted again to an executive officer position on the force. But in the early 2000s, the Stoughton Police Department faced a number of legal issues, and they got a lot of negative publicity under the leadership of Chief Manuel Cachopa. Remember him? He was the one who used to run the Explorers program before he handed it over to Robert. Well, in 2009, Chief Cachopa's tenure ended when he was convicted of being an accessory after the fact to an attempted extortion. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation and 1,000 hours of community service. He even tried to bill the town for his over $500,000 in legal fees. They brought in a new chief who previously worked in internal affairs for the state police, who ended up suspending 6 Stoughton officers under grand jury investigations. He told reporters, quote, "We have police officers here who may not be stable and they're carrying guns. It doesn't get worse than that," end quote. I'm going to argue and say it does get worse. Well, this did not go over well inside the force, and a select board, I really wonder who was on it, they voted to terminate this new chief's contract less than a month after he was hired. And guess who they brought back in? Chief Cachopa. He was reinstated. It didn't matter he had been convicted of a crime. Well, to some it didn't matter, and any officers that took issue with Cachopa were met with revenge by him. He went against anyone he deemed as disloyal. Loyalty. That's a big deal to Stoughton police officers, especially when it comes to fellow officers. You'll see that play out more and more in this case. But let's go back to Robert Devine. He was still on the up and up, it seemed. He was even awarded for his work in investigating corruption within his own department in 2011. And oh, the irony, once you know everything that's to come. This was just 1 year after Sandra had joined the Explorers program. Robert was serving as a department spokesman. He would even serve as chief when the current chief was at trainings. And in May of 2013, when Robert was officially appointed to deputy, his wife Lisa, who was now an officer with the neighboring Quincy Police Department, and their daughter McKenna helped pin his badge to his lapel. He seemed like a real, genuine family man. But just 1 year later, that facade began to crumble. In 2014, the department was thrown into complete chaos again when very graphic photos of now Deputy Devine, who was second in command to their new chief, Paul Chassany, were emailed to members of the department and their spouses. And these photos showed Robert engaging in an act with his mistress, Tiffany Overstreet. Yikes. This was a huge blow for the department. And I'm not trying to be funny, but there is a pun. Apparently, Tiffany had sent these images out to get back at Robert for upsetting her by threatening to leave their relationship. They'd been having a secret affair since the fall of 2013. Well, to counter this, both Robert and his wife Lisa filed a harassment prevention order against Tiffany, which they ended up alleging she violated by doing things like sending flowers to the Devine residence, continuing to call them from unknown or blocked numbers, and emailing Robert all hours of the day and night. Presumably, Tiffany was spoofing her number and creating fake email addresses. Robert also alleged that all of his passwords on certain accounts are being changed and someone was hacking into his accounts and deleting contacts, amongst other concerning things. A full-blown investigation was initiated into this matter, and in the reports that I read, Robert explained that he met Tiffany when him and his wife were considering a separation, and eventually the relationship progressed into something more serious than just something physical. But Tiffany's demeanor allegedly changed when Robert decided to reconcile with his wife. He said that Tiffany began making threats that she was going to take her own life if he left her, and that is when the harassment began. But as the department tried to support Robert and investigate the supposed harassment violations by Tiffany, they found out it was Robert that was continuing the communication with her. And he was still having sex with her this entire time that the order was in place. Yeah. He was actually the one in violation of the order since they were both prohibited from making contact with one another. And in some of the text messages and calls, Robert professed his love for Tiffany and even told her, "Oh, I'm going to withdraw the harassment order," even though he didn't. But once Tiffany showed the police proof of their conversations, she was put under arrest. Ultimately, Robert was put on paid administrative leave, and he had to undergo a 60-day unpaid suspension period before he could be reinstated. However, even though he was allowed to stay on the force, he was significantly demoted to a patrolman, which is the lowest rank in the entire department. Some people thought that this was an extreme measure, since this was not a criminal matter. It was a marital matter that he was involved in with his infidelity. His excuse was he didn't want Tiffany to hurt herself, so he kept having relations with her to appease her. I don't know if he really thought anyone was going to buy that, but his wife did stick by him, and eventually they dropped the charges against Tiffany. And I think you know why, but it could also be because Robert was caught using department resources and technology to investigate Tiffany himself. Yeah, I know this was a lot, but by 2017, the Stoughton Police Department was under new leadership. And this time the chief was a woman, Donna McNamara. And you know what? Some may not think that makes a difference, but I do. The Stoughton residents seemed to believe that the department was finally heading in a positive direction once she was in command. Now that you know enough about Robert Devine, let me tell you how he connects to the twin brothers, Matthew and William Farwell, and how they all end up getting entangled in a nefarious scheme in relation to Sandra Birchmore. Eventually, either because his parents thought it would be beneficial or because he and his twin brother wanted to, they began participating in the Police Explorers program in September of 1998 when they were both 12 years old. But in 2001, when the boys were 16, they were actually caught impersonating police officers. Although just a couple years later, in 2003, Robert Devine invited them to become guest instructors for the Explorers. A year later, Matthew got his GED out in Maine and decided to enlist in the Army. Matthew was trained as an explosive expert, and he was deployed to Afghanistan for 6 months in 2006. He finally ended his military service in 2008, and that is when he moved back to Massachusetts and was hired by the Wellesley Police Department. I told you that Robert Devine brought the brothers in to be guest instructors for a new group of children, and that's when they met 12-year-old Sandra. Robert was very proud of Matt and William. He even bragged that they were in one of the very first explorer groups he ran, and he watched them grow up right before his eyes, saying that if he played even a small part in their success, he would be proud of that. Well, he probably did have a part in the path they went down, a path that ended up destroying Sandra's life. That's nothing to be proud of. Matthew became a Stoughton police officer in 2012, while Robert Devine was on the hiring board that year. And Stoughton Police Department welcomed Matthew in a social media post that described him as a local boy who's happy to be bringing his skills home. And I want to point out, his skills included impersonating a police officer, but that was overlooked by Robert Devine. He turned a blind eye, and he still let Matthew onto the force, knowing that while he was in the Explorers program and he had access to all the police-issued garb, either real or real-looking guns, and access to badges, and even police vehicles, him and his brother were caught pulling cars over and pretending they were real officers. This is according to a report that was filed at the time. Now, it didn't go into detail about whether the boys faced any consequences, but this made me more curious about the policies and procedures for the Civilian Youth Explorers program back in 2012 when Sandra was a part of it and when the Farwell brothers were instructors. So I dug up this document from the Stoughton Police Department that was dated back on April 23rd of 2012. It states that the program is for motivated teens with a cutoff age of 21. It's a 10-week, physically and mentally demanding program based loosely on an actual police academy experience. Graduates of the program are eligible for department ride-alongs during the summer months, and the primary purpose is to give the youth of Stoughton and surrounding towns an activity that will occupy them during high-risk times of the day and have non-confrontational interactions with Stoughton police officers. The program is geared towards young people with an interest in policing, medical, fire service, military service, or a desire to serve their community. The document goes on to say that police explorers are not sworn officers, and they have no law enforcement duties. They're part of the department only because they're attending that 10-week training academy. The explorers wear a uniform that consists of a black Stoughton Police Explorers t-shirt, black pants with a belt, and a black Stoughton Police Explorers ball-style cap and running shoes. This uniform in no way resembles the Stoughton Police uniform, and I've got pictures not only of the Explorers uniform, but also of Sandra participating. She was the only girl in a lot of these photos. And maybe that was just because at specific times, other girls just happened to be absent, but I also noticed that many of the boys in this program appeared to be a lot older than she did. So now I want to explain how Matthew worked his way into Sandra's world. It seemed to start with Matthew offering to tutor Sandra at the Stoughton Public Library in 2011 when she was a freshman at Stoughton High School. Sandra was only about 13 years old at the time, and this man was 12 years older. So he was at least 25 years old. She was a child. He was a predator. It was supposed to be about helping Sandra with her homework, but it was way more than that. He was grooming her. According to the investigative reports that I'm pulling all this information from, grooming is the process that the predator uses to build a relationship with a child or a vulnerable adult in order to gain their trust and enable the groomer to ultimately exploit them. We know that Sandra is a vulnerable person just because of her age, but let's remember, she doesn't have a father figure. She looks up to police officers, and this man is her mentor, someone she trusted, and he abused his power that he had over her. His plan, which was later revealed in messages between the two of them, was to take her virginity. It started with supposed study sessions and test prep, but escalated into Matthew sending a friend request to Sandra on October 28th, 2012. This is where a lot of the incriminating evidence is later found. Nothing online is ever truly gone, even if you delete it, as I'm sure all of you know. Now, I want to point out that I've seen some people victim blaming Sandra for what happened to her. And I want to remind you, she was a child. A child when all this began. Groomers are purposely molding the people they're grooming into what they want them to become. Matthew was creating the version of Sandra that he wanted to exist for his pleasure. Don't forget that. It's not Sandra's fault at all. Even when you begin to see how she interacted with Matthew, he made her believe she could trust him, to protect her, to care about her, maybe even to love her, to the point where she truly believed that she loved him. But that's exactly what he wanted. She was willing to do anything for him, to him, and with him, which is just sickening. Between the Facebook messaging, the in-person meetings at the library, the conversations and interactions became inappropriate, and they moved into physical interactions between Sandra and Matthew as early as 2012-2013 school year when Sandra was only 15. It appears from the documents that I've read that their initial encounter was when Matthew used his hand to violate her. And eventually their encounters escalated into full-blown intercourse on April 10th of 2013, Sandra being 15 and Matthew 27. And by law in Massachusetts, this is statutory you-know-what, the word I can't say here. The legal age of consent is 16 in Massachusetts. And what's even more crazy to me is that while all this is going on, Matthew is dating a woman named Michelle, the woman who would go on to eventually become his wife just 1 month later on May 11th of 2013. So there he was, stealing Sandra's virginity a month prior to making a public vow to Michelle. It's mind-blowing to me. Matthew, of course, continued to essay Sandra, though in her mind, she believed they had a real, genuine relationship. And what he was doing to her wasn't wrong. But that's what she believed because of Matt's manipulation. She was even with him on her prom night. She didn't even get to go out with her friends her age. Instead, she was engaging in inappropriate acts with Matt. And this entire time, Matt was maintaining his facade as a respected police officer, a community leader, and now a husband. And that year, Sandra began to document the details about her and Matt's relationship in her journal. And the encounters with Matt were very frequent. They were many times a week. And from what she wrote, they even became violent. He would use these acts to punish her for things like getting a bad grade in school or when she failed to share her location with him on her phone. That's right, coercive control 100%, because Matt insisted that he was able to know where Sandra was at any time. Could it have been to keep her quiet, or was it to make sure he would always have her anytime he wanted? Maybe it was a little bit of both, but from the outside, everything appeared to be normal. Sandra still participated in the Explorer program, and on December 9th, 2013, the Stoughton Police Department actually posted a photo of Sandra, as well as other members of the group, to their official Facebook page. And in a comment on the picture, whoever was in charge of the page wrote, "Smile, Birchmore." And she was smiling. But underneath that smile was pain, confusion, and a young girl who just wanted to be loved. I believe that anyone who would have seen that post would have thought that this was just another example of a local police department helping young adults reach their dreams of becoming a police officer one day. And Sandra really wanted to be a police officer. Everyone knew she was obsessed with the police. And that's how some people in her life put it, that she was obsessed. As she stood there smiling for that photo, I couldn't help but wonder what she was actually feeling. What Matt taught her was all she knew about being close to someone of the opposite sex. It's a time in a young person's life when they're going through puberty, their hormones are changing, and they're usually experimenting with their feelings and emotions with people their own age. But not Sandra. The man she looked up to, who she wanted to be like, who she trusted to guide her in the right direction, was using her and taking advantage of her. And though he may have been the first, he certainly wouldn't be the only one. Even with everything going on behind closed doors, or I should probably say closed police cars, between Matt and Sandra, she was still thriving in the Explorers program, so much so that in 2014, her mom even wrote a letter expressing her gratitude for the program because it had such a positive impact on Sandra. She had no idea the evil that was lurking underneath it all. The letter was addressed not to Matt Farwell, but to Robert Devine, who Sandra had apparently been spending a lot of time with. Yeah. During the time she was in the Explorers program, Sandra would bring Robert coffee at his desk, and they would engage in private conversations with one another when she was still a minor. Their conversations continued onto Facebook, but not through Robert's real profile. Instead, he had a fake one under the name Marty Riggs, a name of a police officer in the movie Lethal Weapon. And apparently, Sandra wasn't the only minor that Robert talked to, flirted with, or had inappropriate interactions with. There were other interns and teens in the Explorer program and even the school that he was a resource officer for that he engaged with. Back in the early 2000s, he acted as a lunchroom and hallway monitor, and he chaperoned a group of kids who stayed after school for open gym time. One female student expressed that she had a crush on him. You know, it's not unheard of, but what you do about it makes a difference. He took advantage of that situation. This was back in 2001, so well before Sandra was in the picture, but it highlights that Robert exhibited inappropriate behavior with minors. This female student wrote him a love letter, and a couple months later, he brought her into his office when she began crying because she found out he was getting engaged. Once they were alone and inside that room, Robert picked her up and put her on the desk, and he told her she was a knockout and that he was going to take her on a date when she turned 18. Wow. Then he hugged her and he kissed her on the forehead. And guess who was also at the gym during this time? The Farwell brothers. They were students, and this was their mentor. They were watching all of this unfold, and they were under his wing. This female student even cried in Matt Farwell's arms over Robert getting married, so it was known that young girls interacted with Robert, an adult, in this manner. However, this young woman never had a sexual relationship with Robert. Could it have progressed there? Perhaps. But she got caught. Her mom caught her sending instant messages to him and writing a letter to him. She stormed down to the police station and she confronted Robert about what happened between him and her daughter. She was upset that Robert hadn't alerted her about what was going on between them. And at that point, the mom prohibited her daughter from participating in the Explorers program. But this young lady still saw Robert around this small town. Sometimes it was when he was driving around in his personal vehicle with middle school-aged girls. And other times, he would actually pull up to her and her minor friends in his personal car or his police cruiser to talk with them. Evidence shows that Robert was not acting as a father figure. Instead, he was always bragging and showing off that he was in a position of power. He loved the attention he got. He loved that these younger people admired him. It's not clear when the sexual relationship between Robert and Sandra began, but it happened. And I'll discuss that more later. However, Robert was aware of the relationship between Matt and Sandra, going back to at least 2016, but by then, she was already an adult. I wanted to mention something else I found interesting. Sandra's mother, Denise, was a twin with her sister, Darlene, and twins are seen as special to a lot of people. Matt was also a twin, which could have increased Sandra's connection to him because she was the child of a twin herself. And speaking of twins, that same year in 2014, Matt's brother William, who went by Billy, received an offer for employment as a patrol officer and a recruiter for the Massachusetts State Police Department. He did attempt to get a position with the Stoughton PD, but he wasn't successful at that time. Now let me show you another picture that Stoughton Police shared in a tweet back on June 12th of 2014. It's a picture of 8 young Police Explorer boys standing with Sandra, who, again, is the only girl. And the caption reads, "Waiting for their turn." Yikes. Now, I know it most likely wasn't intended to sound so dirty, but come on. Again, I was surprised that she was the only girl in this program at the time, or so it seemed. If she wasn't, then she probably wasn't the only one Matt targeted. But all of this was going on while the community saw smiles on her and the other members' faces, probably imagining the fun they were having and how much they were learning from the police officers that were mentoring them. I wondered if any of the instructors ever had any formal training for the role that they were in, or if they were ever evaluated to make sure it was safe for them to work with children. But all I could find from all the years that this program operated was one document outlining the conditions of the program. It was actually signed by Robert Devine and issued by the governing body called Learning for Life. It does mention that the program has to have at least 4 adults to run it, and they're supposed to go through training and orientation sessions. But it doesn't say that instructors have to do this. This is more geared towards chairmen and committee members. And then those people are responsible for recruiting the appropriate leaders. Sandra continued to participate in this program until she graduated from high school in 2015. And just a year later, in 2016, Sandra's life changed forever. On May 18th, 2016, Sandra's mom, Denise, passed away after being ill for a very long time. This was devastating for Sandra, and she was leaning on her grandma even more until, shockingly, she passed away unexpectedly just a month later on June 24th. Unbelievable and so heartbreaking. Things in Sandra's life got a lot harder after this. She struggled a lot with thoughts of leaving this earth to join them. She had to lean on her Aunt Darlene more than ever, but her support system was truly deteriorating, and her mental health was taking a toll. Meanwhile, she was still engaging in encounters with Matt, who was now a father. At this point, Sandra was an adult. She was 19 years old, so she's legally permitted to engage in consensual relationships with whoever she chooses. But I have to wonder what she imagined the relationship dynamic really was between her and Matt and, well, his wife and child now. I don't like to guess, but if I had to, I could imagine that Matt, like many others in these secret relationships, making promises that one day he would be with Sandra. He would lie to her, maybe string her along, pretending to truly care. But soon, you're going to know what Matt really cared about. What was really getting him going was sicker than I could even have imagined. This was also the year that the Explorer program was dismantled. It's interesting, isn't it? When Sandra's no longer involved, it gets dismantled almost as though it was a tool to specifically target her and possibly other girls like her. But once that goal was achieved, it's like it wasn't needed anymore. But it probably had more to do with the fact that Robert Devine got demoted that same year after his infidelity I talked about and the consequences that came with it. After graduating from high school, Sandra decided she wanted to go into the military, and this is when she began reaching out to Matt's twin brother, Billy, to get advice about recruitment. He'd finally become a Stoughton police officer like his brother in 2017, and he would see Sandra from time to time when she came to visit the police station. Billy was still in the military, so when Sandra asked for his help, he told her he would connect her with a recruiter, which he did. But during this time, Billy and Sandra also started exchanging messages through text and email. Messages that apparently escalated into the ones similar to the appropriate ones she was already sharing with his brother Matt. Sandra spent 2 months in the U.S. Army Reserve, but apparently she didn't make it past the boot camp, so she didn't continue in the Army. Instead, she enrolled in community college in Brockton. She completed her studies in 2018, and then she took the statewide Massachusetts civil service exam in order to finally try to become a Stoughton police officer. She was actually placed on the eligibility list for the force. She was always determined to make her dream of becoming a cop a reality. But I am sure the men in charge were not going to allow that to happen, especially not on this police force. At this time, she was still engaging in intercourse with Matt, while his brother was attempting to get Sandra to engage with him as well. And ultimately, Sandra and Billy did end up in a similar sexual relationship around 2019. So now there are 2 Stoughton police officers engaging in relations with this woman who used to be a child in the Explorer program. I find it hard to believe that Matt hadn't told his brother what Sandra was allowing him to do to her. I think this poor girl was passed around between all of the men that I'm going to discuss because they did talk and each of them wanted their chance, which is disgusting. They knew she was vulnerable, yet later, when confronted, each one of them would make it seem like Sandra was the one who initiated everything. Come on. They would act like she wanted it. That sickens me. Again, let me remind you, she knew no better. This is all that she knew about being with men. She knew it made them happy, and they paid attention to her when she did what they wanted. Evidence in this case shows that both Billy and Matt were exchanging text messages with Sandra while they were on duty during their paid shifts. And this demonstrated conduct that was defined by the force as unbecoming of an officer and in violation of the Stoughton Police Department rules and regulations. It was also determined that Billy was conducting CJIS searches or Criminal Justice Information Services searches on company computers. This was not part of company business. He was inputting Sandra Birchmore's name on 2 occasions in 2019, as well as his own name dating back to 2017. He was searching information about himself at least 24 different times. Now, I tried to understand why he would be searching Sandra or himself, and apparently this system can be used by the public to make complaints against or to keep records of individuals. So perhaps he was looking to see if there was any red flags in reference to himself, and then also in relation to Sandra. Very odd. It was in violation of the use of the Stoughton Police Department's computer, and that mattered. While you're on company time, you're supposed to be doing company business. You're not supposed to be looking things up for your personal benefit. Now, 2019 becomes a very important year because it's when Sandra began texting Matt about their past and the relationship they had in detail. It's where a lot of the evidence in this case was found. This story is about to heat up a lot, sadly. At this point, Matt was a father of 2, still married to his wife, Michelle. And on February 21st of 2019, Sandra and Matt had a text conversation about Matt taking her virginity. Sandra told him she was happy that he took it. Her words, took it. And Matt acknowledged that it was a big thing to get to be first. That's gross. And during the same conversation, they talked about the very first time Matt used his hands, if you know what I mean. And Matt actually asked her what she would have done back then if he would have told her that he wanted to F her that day. Mind you, we're talking about a time when she was 15. 15 years old. Now, Sandra's appeasing him, of course, because remember, she's an adult now, and she has been taught all this time that that's what he likes and what he wants her to say. So She told him she would have let him F her after school. You can tell by the fact that she remembered where she was when she finally realized that she was going to lose her virginity to him, that it meant a lot to her. Of course it did. Now in 2019, it seemed like Matt became more paranoid about the relationship because on March 11th, he told Sandra to, quote, make sure you clear all this out, end quote, meaning delete their messages. But even if she had, it wouldn't have made a difference because they're accessible through Celebrite extractions, which is ultimately where all these messages come from later on. And also Sandra's journal. Remember, she started documenting her and Matt's relationship from back in 2013, and she went into detail about the continuous and sometimes violent relationship where he would engage in forceful acts to punish her for mistakes. Mistakes according to him, like failing to share her location, as I mentioned. There were a number of text message exchanges where Matt would threaten certain acts to punish her, and specifically on March 7th of 2019, here is the exchange. Matt, you would have to take a serious pounding to make me happy. Sandra, is it for everything? Matt, no, you owe me 3. I'll give you a break and spread them out. Sandra, please, not all the same day. Matt, no, I'll give you like a week so you can feel it, and then as soon as it goes away, you'll get it again. So you'll feel it like a whole month. Sandra, not gonna be a fun month. Matt, not for you. End thread. And clearly when he says, feel it, he means pain. This is terrifying and it's disgusting. On March 19th of 2019, Matt and Sandra, who's now 21, exchanged text messages again about the past. And Matt asked her, quote, what would you have done if I never used a condom and never pulled out, end quote, referring to back when she was, again, 15. And she let him know that she would have finished high school, continuing with, quote, I loved prom night. It was worth not going to prom, end quote. And that's why I assumed she was with him, not her friends, during her prom. And during this conversation with Matt, he talked about his desire to use sexual acts and pretend to force her into intercourse. That was one of his fantasies. Disgusting again. After these type of text messages, Matt would instruct Sandra to again, quote, clear out this text, end quote. This was an effort on Matt's part to conceal what he was doing. He did this again on June 5th, making sure all of their text and Facebook messages had been deleted. There were also texts where Matt directed Sandra to destroy evidence regarding the beginning of their relationship when she was only 15. And those exchanges went like this. Matt, wish we would have done it for real the first time. Sandra, I know you do, baby. Sad face. Matt, it would have been perfect. Sandra, yes! Exclamation point. Was it still perfect the first time? Question mark. Matt, of course it was, baby. Sandra, smiley face. Matt, I never thought you'd let me. Sandra, I never thought you would. Matt, I wanted it so bad. Sandra, so did I. I knew the day we made eye contact, I wanted you to F me. Matt, you should have told me. We could have F'd so much sooner. Sandra, smiley face. Matt, clear that part out, baby. Sandra, I did. Matt, good girl. End of thread. Wow. He treats her like a dog, saying good girl at the end. And the fact that he admitted to wishing they would have gotten together sooner is gross because this tells you where his intentions were coming from the beginning. And even though Sandra is going along with all this, remember I told you the interactions, she's an adult at this point, saying that she knew from day one when they made eye contact that she wanted him, please don't hang on those words. She's saying this not as a minor, she's saying it now as an adult, looking backward with an already tainted mind. We also know with conversations like this, many times women are saying what a man wants to hear. They're flirtatious. We probably know what he's doing while reading these texts. And Sandra does what Matt wants. He wanted ultimate control as well. There are a number of text messages with repeated demands from Matt that Sandra set her phone location to let him know where she was, to let him always view her location. He indicated to her she needed to share this information in order to gain back his trust for lying to him about hooking up with other men. He wanted her all to himself. But what I really think is that he may have been scared of Sandra getting close to someone else and exposing the truth about what Matt had been doing all these years. On March 11th, Matt asked her why her location was off and that he could no longer see where she was. And again on March 22nd, he asked Sandra to reveal her location. She responded that she was just at 7-Eleven, but Matt told her he knew she was in Abington. And he asked her multiple times why she would go all the way over there when Stoughton has 100 convenience stores, suggesting that she was meeting with another man. But even if she was, she's an adult. She's allowed to do what she wants, but not while you're with Matt. He wanted her under his thumb. And on April 22nd, he sent her a text stating, "I know you're hiding shit. Your location's off again." And texts like this continued throughout the rest of the relationship. And I'll jump back to those later on. I wanted to mention something else I noticed, which I don't think is a coincidence. All of Sandra's pictures that she shared on Facebook, she appears to look a lot younger than she really is. Now, I realize that sometimes she would post older photos, but even the ones where she was 21 and older, she looks like a teenager. And I truly think that this was on purpose. She clearly knew that the man she thought she loved, Matt Farwell, he liked his girls young. And she played into that fantasy. How do we know this? Well, on June 15th of 2019, Sandra and Matt texted about his interest in minors. They discussed her role playing during their next encounter, with Matt asking her how old she was going to pretend to be next time. Sandra responded 14, and Matt replied with a smiley face. Ew. He's having her pretend that she's underage. It's sick. It's weird. That same month on June 17th, they discussed how Matt used to help her with test prep. I'm doing little air quotes because that was a code word for when he used to meet her at the library and engage in other behaviors. Matt texted Sandra saying that she should have told him that she was interested in effing him that day. Sandra said she was scared, and Matt explicitly says, "Did you think I wouldn't F you?" I'm obviously abbreviating the F word, y'all. This is written out. It's very vulgar. And Sandra responded, "Yes. And like, 'cause of my age, I didn't want you to be like, ugh, no, WTF, end quote." And Matt responded, "I understand that." These messages show the psychological manipulation that had been going on for years and the hold that Matt had on Sandra. During the time that Sandra was in high school, Matt was meeting with her in his police car or his truck to engage in relations on multiple occasions while he was on duty. And what he would do was he would falsely represent that he had worked certain hours when, in fact, he was not working. He was engaging in these acts or spending time with Sandra, essentially being paid to violate her. He would leave in the middle of his shift to go to places like her grandma's house, parking lots, including one at Costco and Five Guys restaurant. This is actually considered fraud. It's because he's altering or lying about working when he's on the clock. Fall 2019 is also when man number 4 comes into the picture. I've already discussed Robert, Billy, and Matt, and I wish this wasn't true. But like the Twitter caption, it's like all these men were just waiting for their turn. But this encounter wasn't as nefarious as the previous 3. Sandra went into the animal shelter to adopt a cat, and she met with an animal control officer for Stoughton Police Department named Joshua Heel. This was another man in uniform, but not a police officer. At the time, Sandra was an adult, and the two of them began talking while she was there, and they ended up keeping in touch as friends on Facebook. Side note, Josh was married at the time, but as they got to know one another, Sandra would occasionally stop by his office at the pet shelter. Now, 3 months after Josh had first met Sandra, she came by to visit, and he noticed that she kept receiving and replying to a bunch of messages on her phone. Once she was done, Sandra explained without Josh even asking that the guy that she was seeing was tracking her location, and he saw that she was at the animal shelter, and he knew Josh was there, so he wanted to know why she was there. This was Matt. But at the time, she didn't disclose that information to Josh. Eventually, Sandra and Josh did have a sexual encounter one time. Sandra ended up going down on him in the parking lot after he got off work. So he wasn't on the clock, it was consensual, and they were adults. But the issue was Matt. Somehow he caught on that Sandra was interested in Josh, who was 40 at the time. She was 21, and he wasn't happy about it. Now, this is one of those things that Matt would punish her for. Again, air quotes for those not watching. She wasn't allowed to be active with any other guys, and he would threaten violence if she was. That would have been very hard for Sandra. The control that he had over her would make it hard for her to move on if she wanted to. But she still was texting with Josh on a regular basis, and eventually, she began to confide in him about things like her mental health issues, and ultimately, she revealed that she was in a relationship with Officer Matthew Farwell, and that she was engaging in relations with both him and his brother William, and even Robert Devine. Josh found out that Sandra was meeting Matt at his marital home, at the soccer field across from the animal shelter, and other places. Now, you see, Josh was not friends with either Robert, Billy, or Matt, so he tried to do his best to be a friend to Sandra. After that one encounter they had together, Josh actually encouraged Sandra to move on with her life, that all of the men that she had been with were married, including him, and that she needed to find her own track in life, such as going back to college or doing what she truly wanted to do. But he could tell that Sandra believed she was in love with Matt. Josh tried to explain to her that Matt already had a family and a wife, and that was going to be a lot for him to leave in order to be with her. Josh could tell that those were things that Sandra really wanted, to be loved, to get married, and to have a family of her own. But at the time, Josh could tell she was hoping she could have these things with Matt. Now, during the time that Sandra is telling Josh that she's doing all this with these men, she actually had some proof that it was happening with Billy. Because Billy had sent her explicit photos and videos of his own wife, and I don't know why he would do this. The whole thing is sick, but she showed that to Josh. And even though she was exchanging a lot of intense and graphic things with Josh, she never told him that Matt and her had been together when she was only 15. And Josh never told her secrets. He never spoke to any of these men that she spoke about having relations with her. That October of 2019, Sandra's favorite aunt Alice passed away, which again sent her into another depression, and she was put on antidepressant medication to help her cope, and she was seeing her longtime therapist as well to talk about her struggles. But I'm not sure whether this therapist knew all of the details about her relationship with Matt. Some reports that I read stated that Sandra had gotten pregnant sometime during this year, but ended up having a miscarriage. However, I could not find any proof of this in legal documentation, but pregnancy will become a key part of this case. So let's jump to 2020. Remember, this is the height of the pandemic. Sandra is still living in Stoughton with her aunt Darlene at the home she used to live in that was owned by her grandmother figure, Claire. But they were getting ready to put that house on the market. So Sandra was under increased amounts of stress. She was trying to figure out what she was going to do for work, where she was going to live, and she had 2 cats. She's now looking for a job. She knew that a job would take time away from her animals. She was considering even going back into the military, but she was worried about who would look after her kitties. She called around to a few of her friends because she told them she didn't trust her aunt to take care of the cats like she did because they were like her babies. Now, during this time, Sandra was still in contact constantly with Matt, and she was still seeing him a number of times a week. They were also having conversations about the past again. And on February 11th of 2020, it was about the exact day that she lost her virginity. Here is that exchange. Sandra, I had butterflies so bad the day you took my virginity. Matt, me too. It was such a big day. Sandra, I still know the date till this day. Matt, really? Sandra, yes. Matt, smiley face. That's not a date I'll ever forget. It was April 10th, 2013. Matt, smiley face. Sandra, best day of my life with a heart emoji. Matt, me too. End of thread. Then, on February 21st, Matt described pinning her down while they were having relations and says, quote, will you say, Matt, stop. I'm 13. I'm not ready for this. OMFG, please stop. End quote. So gross that I even have to read that. There were several texts just like this where Matt would instruct her to act like she was his sister and he was her older brother coming into her room at night to do things to her. Yeah. And it continues with them reminiscing again. Sandra says, I listened better back then though. Matt, I wish it had been a year sooner after helping you study at the library. You still listen and give me whatever I want, baby. Sandra, I didn't even make you wait a year after that. And good. But I don't think you're going to get what you want next time. Matt, of course I will. I'll just take it. Sandra, that's what you think. Good luck with that. Matt, what was the first day you said, OMG, I want this guy to be my first. I want to feel him inside me. Sandra, yeah, so 2012, I finally decided that I was going to try to find a way to F you and just wasn't sure how. How did you feel when I asked to make your dream come true? Matt, amazing, exclamation point. Sandra, good. Matt, I absolutely would have effed you in 12. Sandra, in 12? Question mark. Matt, 2012. End of the thread. And let me point out a few things. First of all, in 2012, she would have been 14. Secondly, there are times it actually seems like Sandra is attempting to get Matt to confirm the date when they began their relations, almost like she wanted proof. She could have been becoming more fed up with Matt because he wasn't committing to her more. And by now, she's 22 years old. She's known him for over a decade, and he's been in a secret relationship with her for that long, for at least 7 of those years. She's now older. She's bound to have more wisdom and knowledge about what he was doing to her and that it was wrong. It appeared that Matt was also catching on to this, that Sandra may be trying to expose him because he gets increasingly paranoid, having her continuously delete things and ultimately wanting them to be even more secretive about things. Remember how he used to want to track her location? Well, later, in July of 2020, it seemed like Matt transitioned from wanting to track Sandra to prioritizing their secrecy about everything. Here's an exchange that proves that. Matt, you can turn your location off if you want. Sandra, it wasn't off. That's why I wasn't sure why it wasn't showing up. Then I just unshared and reshared it with you. You can have it. It's been a thing for years now, LOL. Matt, LOL, okay. Sandra, I don't care if you know where I am. I'm not doing anything I shouldn't be. My legs are shaking a shit ton right now. I'm feeling that tomorrow. Matt, LOL, I know that. I just don't really like any of that stuff. Big Brother is watching. Sandra, I don't understand what you mean. Matt, I'm just saying, iPhones keep track of way too much stuff. I don't mean anything by it. End of thread. But doesn't he? Doesn't he mean he's worried that things are going to get out? This increased paranoia may also have something to do with the fact that Matt's wife was pregnant with their 3rd child, something that Sandra wasn't aware of yet. Doing the math, I think that Michelle probably got pregnant in or around May of 2020. And before this, during the entire year of 2020, Matt would meet with Sandra many times while he was on duty, so Michelle probably thought he was just out on the job. He also would tend to meet Sandra late at night. Now, I am not going to list every single one in 2020, but there's this chart in one of the investigative reports dating back to April 2020. I'm showing all of the times that he had relations with her on duty. And as you can see, there were a lot of them that were at 11 p.m. or between the hours of 8 p.m. and midnight. There's 21 listed right there. And those are the ones that could be corroborated through text. For example, like this one on April 10th, 2020, when Matt texted with her saying, quote, I'm going to sneak away from work quick, end quote. Or on November 24th of 2020, when Sandra asked him if he would be on duty that night when they met up, and he said, yes, I'll be on the clock. I want to point something out. Sandra's evolution of the knowledge of how she was being mistreated reminds me of a movie I like called The Island. If you've never seen it before, humans are created in a lab to essentially be someone's clone, like a life insurance policy. Basically, let's say you get a disease, then you could harvest an organ from your clone. And all the while, these clones are living in this compound as real people. They have no idea they're being kept alive for the benefit of their owners. It's very sad. But eventually, a couple of these clones become aware of what's happening, and they risk exposing the entire scheme. So, of course, the company wants them destroyed. This is what is happening to Sandra. She was becoming more and more aware that Matt was probably not going to leave his wife, that she's been used, and that she won't have the life she's always dreamed of with Matt. The reason I think this is because of what's going to happen when she finds out that Matt's wife is pregnant. Matt could have been increasingly worried because Sandra would keep bringing up the first time they were together, but then he would go with it, and he would talk about the things they did. It was kind of like he couldn't help himself. June 19th of 2020, this conversation happened. Sandra, I'm glad you agreed to take my virginity though. Matt, me too. LOL. If I pushed, I absolutely could have effed you without condoms from day one. Sandra, probably if you really pushed it. I was kind of scared to say no in the beginning, not knowing how you would take it. So yeah, you would have got no condoms, LOL. And that is the end of that conversation. But things are about to get even more complicated. In September of 2020, Sandra applied for an apartment in Canton, Massachusetts, which is only about a 10-minute drive from Stoughton. They're both relatively small towns where everyone knows one another. And if you have been following the Karen Reed trial, that case took place in Canton. That was the connection I was talking about, but I'm going to get into specifics later. In the beginning of October, she started working at East Elementary School in Sharon, Massachusetts as a teacher's aide, and she planned to move out of her aunt's house when she was able to secure an apartment of her own close by. But it was the same month that she learned the news that would set her life on a deadly downward spiral. Even though Joshua Heel eventually lost touch with Sandra closer to 2020 because he switched from being an animal control officer to being a police officer in another county, he messaged her on October 5th of 2020 to let her know that Matt's wife was pregnant with their third child. Sandra didn't know, and she seemed upset about this. Matt had kept this a secret from her. Apparently earlier that year, Sandra had gotten pregnant and had a miscarriage. This was either the first or second time, so that could have added more grief to the situation. She had already been an emotional wreck that year, and back in May, she had an argument with a family member, and apparently they thought it got so bad that Sandra may take her life. So they called the police, and they had a well-being check done on Sandra, and they decided to transport her to the hospital to be evaluated and see if she was at any risk for self-harm. She was released just a couple hours later, but clearly there were issues in Sandra's life, and those close to her knew it. She began confiding in people more and more, even texting Matt's brother Billy a lot during this time frame, even though at one point he decided to block her on social media. It was because apparently she approached him when he was with his family during a 4th of July event. And I can imagine Billy being afraid that she would end up doing or saying something that would tip off his wife that they had something going on, and that she had hooked up with him, and they still were. But after a while, Billy resumed exchanging hundreds of text messages with her, usually after midnight when he was on the graveyard shift at work, and he would meet up with her for sex. Meanwhile, Matt is expecting baby number 3 with his wife. It's completely in the dark about Sandra, and she supposedly babysat for Matt's kids on at least one occasion. Wow. And he's still messing around with this poor girl, still stringing her along for his pleasure, to use her for his sick fantasies. Things he probably wouldn't dare act out on his wife, a woman he loves. But it's okay to do it to poor Sandra. But going back to Josh, he told Sandra about Matt's wife being pregnant, and it seemed like this was the last straw for Sandra because she told Josh she had actually drafted a message to Matt's wife, revealing that he had been having sex with her for nearly 10 years. Wow. So now, if Josh didn't know that Matt had committed a sex crime, he did now. And he was a police officer. The message to Matt's wife stated in part, quote, "I'm just messaging to inform you that your husband, Matthew, has been out cheating on you since before you guys were even married," end quote. Now, there's no record that this draft message was ever sent to Michelle, but damn, can you imagine getting that message? There are ripple effects to what Matt and these other men had done to Sandra. It didn't just affect her, it affected so many other people. Everyone in Matt's life, his wife, his children, and so many others. It even affects us, even now. That would have been devastating news, that your husband had not only been cheating, but also committed a crime like this. It's unreal, especially since he has children of his own. That's just shocking to me. Well, of course, Sandra confronted Matt about his wife's pregnancy, but that's not all. She gave him an ultimatum. She told him that either Matt would agree to engage in unprotected sex with Sandra with the goal of conceiving a child, or Sandra would disclose their relationship. According to texts between Matt and Sandra, he apparently agreed, probably because he knew he really had no choice. He didn't want to lose his wife, his job, and even maybe his freedom if the extent of what he had done was exposed. Sandra sent a photo to Matt that showed her ovulation schedule, and the two of them started discussing the timing of their encounters around the specific times in Sandra's cycle. But apparently Matt was under the impression, or so he said, that he was only going to do this once. But we know the likelihood of conceiving right away would be slim. So maybe that's why he initially agreed. But Sandra was still young, so her chances were probably much higher. But regardless, on October 12th, Matt and Sandra get into an argument about the terms of their new agreement. Here's that exchange. Matt: I said the agreement was once. That was our compromise. Sandra: I asked if you could try this month. I didn't realize that meant F me once, LOL. And then I asked if we could try through this year, and you said I think about it. Matt: Our compromise was try once. Sandra: Yeah, it was to try this month. So you're thinking about the second thing I said as far as the rest of the year, ? Matt: You said try once this month. If it happens, it's meant to be. Those are the exact words. End of their thread. Now, I was curious what Sandra meant when she said the second thing for the rest of the year. I never got clarification on that. If you know, let me know. On November 3rd of 2020, she asked Matt via text if they could try again that month or whether they would need to talk in person about that. Matt responded that that was an in-person discussion. Then on November 5th, she asked him if he had given any more thought to their prior conversation and told him that she thought of a way they could both be happy. Are you ready for this? Sandra: How would you feel about us having a baby, you being there and signing the birth certificate? There's never going to be a need for your information anyway, so you'll be safe there. And I won't talk shit about her, meaning his wife, or your kids. That way, we both get what we want. You asked me the other day what I wanted, and I didn't want to give it to you in the form of an ultimatum. So I'm trying to do it with you as a compromise type of thing. Can you tell me what you thought of? I'm down for discussing it in person. But the more I thought about you signing, it really isn't going to have an impact on you because of the way things are going to fall in the future. Matt: Okay, that's an in-person discussion. And that was the end of their thread. On November 14th, Sandra moved out of her aunt's house and into her own apartment at Windsor Woods in Canton, Massachusetts. Matt helped her get squared away in her new place, which was only a 15-minute drive from her new place of employment at East Elementary School. Sandra asked him at that point if Matt wanted a copy of her key to her new place, and Matt told her that he didn't think that would be a good idea for him to have a key to her apartment, so he did not take her up on that offer. By the end of November 2020, after Sandra learned that she still wasn't pregnant, she asked Matt about continuing to try to conceive for another month. On multiple occasions, Matt told Sandra that they would need to discuss that topic in person. But Matt continued to meet with Sandra, and their text messages suggest they remained sexually active together. At this point in time, Sandra was also meeting up with Robert Devine and having relations with him as well. And they were still corresponding on Facebook under his fake name, Marty Riggs. There's proof of this. On December 21st, Robert requested that Sandra come meet him at a restaurant. She texted back that she would, and then he let her know when he was there. Sandra texted back that she was on her way there. So I just want to reiterate that all three of these men were involved with Sandra at this time, and all three of them were married, and all three of them had to have known about one another. Finally, December 28th, Sandra sent Matt a text informing him that she was pregnant. She sent him a photo of a poster that she had made to celebrate the pregnancy. And I have to say, I teared up when I saw this for the very first time. It's sad. It says, "Congrats," with a heart. "We are going to be parents." And then it has 2021 underneath with stickers of cute little animals and a colorful rainbow border. I'm sure that Sandra was crushed when Matt's immediate response was, "I literally have nothing to say right now. How could you express that in a text when I said, I don't appreciate it?" Remember that Matt said these discussions about pregnancy had to happen in person? They continued to argue in the following text thread. Matt: "How far are you?" Sandra: "Regardless of how far, we're keeping it. But 3.5 weeks, which means I conceived this month." Matt: "Okay, we need to talk then." Sandra: "No shit, that's obvious. And the birth certificate is being signed or hers isn't." She was referring to his wife, since she's also expecting. Michelle was about 8 months pregnant at this point. Sandra: "I'm mad you're acting how you are over a choice we both made." She put that all in caps. Matt: "I'm mad you act like you gave anyone a choice." Sandra, ? Matt: "Per usual, you make and do whatever you want." Sandra: "All I said was, can I have it? And you said, have what? And I said, you know what I'm asking for. And you stood up and said, yeah." You've been doing that. You're mad she's due in February and I'm due in August or September. And you don't know how you're going to be there for both of us. And you need to be there during labor for me too, because your kid should matter. Matt, you are truly the worst person on the face of the earth. End of that thread. Wow. He calls her the worst person in the world. Has he ever stopped to think about his own actions? Because he can point the finger right back at himself. He's disgusting. He's a monster. He is the worst. It's him that wants everything his way, wants whatever he wants. It's him that never gave Sandra a real choice. It's him projecting. And this conversation wasn't over. After this exchange, Sandra again threatened to expose the truth about their prior relations when she was only 15 and their ongoing relationship, to which Matt responded by indicating that Sandra had threatened him and that caused him to agree to impregnate her. Matt, for the past week and a half, the doctor wasn't right, but now she was, and you just throw it at me because now you've got me. You honestly have no idea how to treat people. I have fucking bent over backwards for you. Now you want to act like this is some free will decision? You have threatened me from the word go. If I didn't do and give you what you wanted, you would ruin me. I made a deal with you, and you changed the terms at every turn. We will deal with this tomorrow. End of their conversation. And on June 29th, the next day, Matt and Sandra did meet to talk in person. After this meeting, she sent Matt a text that alluded to a physical altercation between them. Sandra, it made me really uncomfortable and stressed out and scared when you were next to me because I thought you were going to hit me after you said what you said and took things out of my hand. That's why I was crying. I know you wouldn't, but it still scared me. I'm going to pause for a second and tell you, just so you know, Sandra is only 4 feet 10 inches tall, and Matt is 6'4". He towered over her. I'm sure she was terrified, and it makes me sad when she said she knew he wouldn't hit her. She had no idea what was going on in his mind. She later told a friend that when he left, he told her that she should just end her life. That's so sad. He doesn't care about her at all. She was his play toy, and now she's causing issues for him. After this, it seemed like either Sandra told everyone she knew that she was pregnant because she was so excited, which was definitely true. She was so happy, and she really couldn't wait to be a mom. But she might have been telling people because she wanted to get back at Matt. It was clear he was not interested in having a family with her. She even told his brother Billy that she was pregnant and that Matt was the father. But Billy said that he didn't believe it. He said he knew his brother wouldn't have gotten her pregnant. He, along with Josh, thought that Sandra could be lying to keep Matt in a relationship with her, or so that he would commit to her even more because they had both caught her in lies before. Sandra was the type to exaggerate and kind of stretch the truth here and there, so they weren't sure what to think. Josh knew that she was hooking up with other men, so he didn't know if she even knew who the father was, if she was even pregnant. The truth is that Sandra was an oversharer, and I had heard this and read articles that said this, and I was wondering, was this true or was this a perception by the immediate public now? But this actually came straight from the various people in Sandra's life. And it was mentioned a number of times in the investigative reports that I read. She would share very personal things unprompted with people that she hardly knew. Now, we see in some of this with the men that were taking advantage of her, but she would also do this with women she worked with and other people as well. It was especially uncomfortable when she would overshare to her supervisors at the school she worked at. For one thing, one of her supervisors didn't think Sandra was even good at her job. And this was mostly due to the fact that she was constantly preoccupied. She often had to be redirected, and she required a lot more guidance than she should have for someone her age. I want to mention, I said Sandra appeared to be younger. Well, according to the people around her that interacted with her, she acted younger as well. I believe that this could be directly related to the way that she had been manipulated and groomed. But going back to her supervisor, she would catch Sandra on her phone or her laptop for personal reasons at inappropriate times when she was supposed to be working. But let's look at who her role models are. Cops who meet with her and text her while they are on the job. Going further, her supervisor felt that Sandra was a little off, those were her words, and that the personal information she shared was way too intimate, like the fact that she was dating a police officer that was 10 or 11 years older than her. That's what she told her boss. and that he had 2 kids, and that she just ran into his ex-wife at Starbucks. We know it's not his ex-wife. So perhaps, not wanting to look like she was doing anything wrong, she said ex-wife. All in all, Sandra's boss found that this was very unprofessional, and there was actually a number of reports of Sandra oversharing with other school employees. She would express her desire to get pregnant when she was trying with Matt. She would say her boyfriend finally said yes. Her boss found it odd that she was also telling people she was pregnant when she was only about 4 or 5 weeks at the time. Usually, women will wait until they're at least 12 weeks, so her boss found that to be odd, as well as the fact that she was going up to people she hardly knew and announcing her pregnancy. This made a number of them very uncomfortable. But it was when Sandra asked her boss for her personal phone number, as well as whether she could borrow some money, that her boss decided she had to go speak to the assistant principal about the oversharing. There was a number of school employees that became aware that Sandra was dating a cop, but not just a cop, an older cop that worked for the Stoughton Police Department, and he had gotten her pregnant. She went so far as to tell some of them all about how he didn't want to sign the birth certificate, and that his wife could not find out. With all the details she was sharing, it was only a matter of time before the puzzle pieces were going to come together. I feel bad for Sandra, because when I was reading about all the things she was sharing, even though she wasn't naming Matt specifically, she would talk about things like he agreed to be a part of the baby's life, that they already had a visitation plan, which holidays they'd spend with the baby. These things weren't true. And I realize this is probably her speaking them into existence, like creating her own reality, hoping and dreaming and wanting to be like everyone else, wanting what they had, a normal relationship. Because none of her relationships with the men in her life had been normal. Sandra wasn't normal either. How could she be? How could a person in her position be normal? Those close to her said she acted like a teenager. She came across acting like a child without a parent that needed a lot of help. But one thing no one noticed this entire time were any signs that she was hurt until later. By January 3rd, Sandra was back in the text threads with Matt regarding the baby, this time asking if the baby could have his last name. However, he told her, like times before, that he would not discuss that issue on text. And this was significant. The reason why is because his reluctance to text about these intimate things is not consistent with their long history of messages discussing things that were seemingly private. For example, thousands of texts between him and her discussing his work, being a police officer, his sexual fantasies, violent things, including many references to choking, forced intercourse, and graphic details about their encounters. So why was this any different? Well, because things were shifting. Matt was feeling the pressure. He was scared his secret was going to be exposed, especially if his secret became flesh and blood in the form of a baby. Here's a text thread from January 3rd. Sandra, so I have a compromise for you. You don't need to sign the birth certificate if the baby can have your last name. Matt, not discussing in text. We can talk in person. End of that thread, and then 3 days later, Sandra began to ask Matt what their family would look like. Sandra, 1, you don't have to sign the birth certificate if I'm allowed to at least list you, and they can have your name, and I won't move to Stoughton or where your family resides. 2, I won't bitch about the holidays, but I would like you to come a few days before Christmas and Easter so you can see what they got from me, and I don't want you to leave them out. And 3, if you want to try to support them, we can talk about that, but I do want you to see them. I feel like I'm trying to be as fair as I can, and I want you to be there for labor. That I'm standing my ground on. Matt, okay, we can discuss this more in person. Sandra, okay, I figured. Does it kind of sound okay to you? Matt, it's a lot to think about. It's so much more than you have ever asked for. Sandra, and still less than what any other girl would ask for. End of thread, and that's sad, but it's true, and she knows it. She knows he's doing the bare minimum. He's giving her the short end of the stick. I wish I could have just told her to run so far away from this man, but it's part of the sick cycle of these predators. As much as they hurt their victims rely on them. Sadly, Sandra didn't have many people to rely on, and she was apparently also low on cash because, as I pointed out, she had already asked at least 2 people if she could borrow money from them. She did have to pay her own rent now, and on top of that, she'd been spending money on baby items and doctor's appointments. A close friend of Sandra's, who knew her since they were both about 7 years old, said that she was hanging out with Sandra at her new apartment, and she told her that her boyfriend was going to leave his wife. But he can't right now because of the pandemic. This friend also lended Sandra $300, and she told Sandra around January 16th that she was going to have to pay it back. Sandra told her okay, that she would send her $150 that night, but then her friend got no response, and this made her upset. Because this friend sat through so many conversations with Sandra about her life, and she felt like Sandra ghosted her as soon as she asked for her money. Well, a few days later, Sandra got back in touch and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry that I didn't respond." She told her she hit her head on her car door, and then she hit her head again on the pavement and had to go to the hospital. This wasn't true. It was an excuse because Sandra couldn't pay back the money. Well, this friend had enough. She told her if she didn't pay her back, she was going to call the police and file a report. And that is what she did. On January 20th, she called Stoughton Police Department and informed them about a money dispute she was having. But the person who answered advised her that this was a civil matter, and this made her friend even more mad. So much so, she decided to expose Sandra to this person on the phone. She told them that the officer that Sandra was having a sexual relationship with, Officer Matt Farwell, should tell her to pay the money back. This wasn't good. This was bad. It was very bad for Sandra because it wasn't long until Matt found out, and he was extremely upset. He sent her a series of text messages with expletives telling her that he thought no one knew about the relationship, that she had no clue how bad this was, indicating that he does not know if now he needs to worry about other disclosures. This was their conversation. "Matt, dude, your fucking friend called my job Sandra, WTF. Sandra, question mark? Matt, your friend," he puts the person's name, "just called my fucking work to complain about me, WTF. Sandra, I don't know. Matt, what do you mean you don't know? Sandra, I just woke up. Matt, did you steal from her? Sandra, no. Matt, what's going on? You also told me that no one knew about us, yet she claimed we are effing. Sandra, it's literally nothing. Matt, it's not nothing. She called my job. That's insane. Why would she call and drop my fucking name, Sandra? Like, what do I have to do with you not giving her something? Like, you have no idea how bad what she did is. I literally can't believe this is even real life. Like, what else do I have to worry about now? Which other friend will do something tomorrow?" That was the end of their thread. And what a twisted web he's woven. And now he's wrapped up in it and he wants out. Poor Matt. Wouldn't he have known that the truth always comes out, even if it takes some time? What you try to push down will always come to the surface. Always. When Matt was alerted about this call from Sandra's friend, the person who relayed this message at the police department took down the friend's name and their information, and they presented it to Matt, and he was immediately pissed off. He ordered this person not to speak about this to anyone and to never talk about it again. The person was pretty shocked. They had never seen Matt act that way. It seemed totally out of character for him, because indeed, his mask was slipping off. On February 4th, the Sharon Police Resource Officer Michael Hawking called Canton Police Department, informing them that one of their employees, Sandra Birchmore, had not shown up for work for several days, and all attempts to reach her by phone were not successful. He requested a well-being check be done at her apartment. Officers Charles Yeaton and Ensley Cotard of the Canton Police Department went over there at approximately 10:55 a.m., but they were unable to get a response at the door to Sandra's apartment. They got in touch with the property manager and received a key to open door 3307. There was a kitchenette immediately upon entry towards the left side of the apartment. There was a living room directly in front of the entranceway. The officers observed a short hallway that led directly to the bathroom, and the single bedroom was to the left of the hallway. They noted that the interior of the apartment was generally unorganized and unkept. The countertops in the kitchenette were almost entirely covered with personal items. Postal correspondence, junk mail, medication, and trash. as well as an ultrasound photo with Sandra's name and her date of birth on it. There was also a baby stroller still in its box and a sonogram image decorated with glitter and affixed to a sign that read, "Congratulations, you're going to be a father." As they proceeded into the living room area, they noted trash and clumps of cat fur on the carpet, indicating that it had not been cleaned or vacuumed in some time. There was debris, trash, and personal effects on virtually every horizontal surface in the living room area. There were 2 glass end tables, a dining room table, a glass coffee table, a couch, and a television stand with a TV. There was a nook area that contained 2 recliners side by side, which were both covered on top and in front with personal items and boxes. They observed the interior of the bathroom to be generally neat and organized. Nothing of note was located inside. But then, the officers proceeded to the bedroom, and that's when they observed a young woman who was clearly deceased on the floor. She was seated on the floor in a reclined position, hanging from a doorknob with the strap of a duffel bag around her neck. The strap was connected to her closet doorknob, and it appeared as though she had been dead for days. 2 cats were observed in the apartment. There was a desk lamp turned on and colored Christmas lights around the window that were also on. The room was cluttered and untidy in the same manner as the kitchenette and living room, with items covering the desk and a plastic storage table with drawers. There was an unmade bed with a sheet over the mattress and an exposed box spring with a pair of eyeglasses on top of the bed. Among the scattered items inside the bedroom, they noted a U.S. Army ACU patterned duffel bag. After finishing the examination of the apartment, the officers noted nothing suspicious. No signs of a struggle had taken place. Despite the clutter, all items appeared to be in their intended locations, and no items appeared to have been knocked over or strewn about in an unintended manner. The walls showed no signs of scuff marks or indentations. No drag marks were visible on the floor or the carpeting. However, Officer Ensley Cotard observed a large pooling of dried blood around the victim's mouth. Her skin was discolored, it was blue, and lividity indicated that she had been deceased for an extended period of time. They went back to where the woman was found. Her cell phone was on the floor approximately 12 inches from her right hand and 6 inches from her right knee. They examined the woman for any indications of physical wounds, to include grab marks, scratches, markings consistent with being struck, or any defensive wounds, but none were noted. They observed no bruising, swelling, or external trauma to her body, and noted no markings on her neck to indicate an attempt or a struggle to loosen or remove the ligature, which suggested that this was self-inflicted, especially with the way that she looked. So this was a preliminary manner of death until the autopsy report came in. The victim was identified as 23-year-old Sandra Birchmore. Crime scene services documented the entire scene and her body, taking digital photographs. Then she was transported to the office of the chief medical examiner. Sergeant Michael Lank from Canton Police Department was called out. I want to stop for a second. If you're familiar with the Karen Reed case, I'm going to make a connection here. Sergeant Lank worked on the Karen Reed case. He was also at that crime scene as well. He was the one that found the broken cocktail glass outside in the snow, as well as the piece of what Canton Police Department said was a piece of a broken taillight from Karen's SUV. During the trial, Lank was questioned about his relationship with the Albert family, and there was questionable things mentioned during that case, like how he left John O'Keefe's crime scene wide open for contamination, or how at first he told dispatch that John O'Keefe looked like he had been in a fight, but then he changed his tune and agreed that the evidence pointed to Karen. The defense argued that he was trying to protect the Albert family. I wanted to mention this because I told you in the beginning that there were overlapping parties in both of these cases, considering it happened in the same town. But back to Sandra's case. Lank was called to the scene at about 10 a.m., and once the scene was secured and Sandra's body was transported, Lank went to the rental office and spoke to the property manager, Aaron Porter, and the maintenance supervisor, Carlos Verissimo. Lank questioned them about their video surveillance equipment. The only video they were able to access captured the interior entrance to Sandra's building, which was number 3. It was motion activated, and it captured people as they came and went through the front lobby where the elevators were. Sergeant Lank asked to review this footage. He made the following observations, and I'm going to put this up on the screen. We do not have all of the CCTV footage, but I'll let you know when I do. And also to note, The timestamps. They're 13-minute fast on the video, so as I speak, I'm going to adjust the times to what they really were. Back on Sunday, January 31st, Sandra leaves the building at 9:38 a.m. and she's on her phone. She returns to the building at 9:55 carrying a large box containing a baby car seat. She leaves again at 9:57 a.m. and she returns to the building at 1:02 p.m. with 2 pizza boxes and she was talking on the phone. Then she leaves the building again at 4:26 and returns at 4:28, texting on her phone. She was captured again on camera, leaving the next day on Monday, February 1st. Now I do have this footage, so I'm going to put it on the screen. At 12:51 p.m., she's talking on her phone near the elevators as she goes up to her apartment. She comes back down around 5:01 p.m. She's standing by the door like she's waiting for someone. You can see that there's another person at the outer door. I don't know if they had a conversation, but she kind of looked annoyed or confused. She closes the door and heads to the elevator holding something in her hand. The person outside doesn't come in. Later, at 5:31 p.m., she comes out of the elevator again, holding her lanyard and keys, and walks outside wearing a jacket. She kind of looks both ways and then pulls her hood up and walks off camera. She comes back about a minute later carrying a snow brush and heads back to the elevator at 5:33 p.m. This was the last time that Sandra was seen on video, and she was wearing the same outfit when she was found. The teal leggings, the black socks, etc., which would be consistent with her dying that same evening. The property manager retrieves Sandra's file and locates her emergency contact, who is Darlene Smith. This is her aunt, and they make a death notification indicating that Sandra was found deceased and how she was found, suggesting it was self-inflicted. Darlene said that didn't make any sense. Sandra was pregnant and she was really happy about it. We're going to get back to this. But Sergeant Lank received an email that same evening from the property manager. She wanted to let him know that they were going through the rest of the footage. And I was wondering why he didn't already do that. Why did you stop when she got very confusing? But she let him know that they saw a man enter the building. The property manager let him know this could be a guy named Alexander, one of Sandra's friends, because he came in a few weeks ago and applied for housing, saying that he got a recommendation from Sandra. However, the property manager said she cannot be positive because it's the pandemic. The man had a medical mask on. Sergeant Lank let her know he would address it, and he would look at the video when he got a chance. Well, we're going to look at it now. At 9:14 p.m., Monday, February 1st, a man is seen coming through the outside door of Sandra's building, and then he used a code to enter the main door to the lobby. He's wearing jeans, a dark-colored hoodie, which is up over his head, brown boots, and a medical mask covering most of his face. He pushes the elevator button and proceeds inside. He reemerges at 9:43 p.m. He appears to be either wearing a different jacket or it's unzipped, exposing a shirt underneath because there's a white emblem that can be seen on it. He casually walks out of the building. Well, by Saturday, the 6th of February, Sergeant Lank got another email from this property manager saying that she was very concerned about a phone call that she received the night before. It was from a friend of Sandra's named Tina. Tina said that she was really upset, and she revealed that Sandra had been dating a police officer and that he was the father of her unborn baby, and that he threatened Sandra that if she didn't get rid of it, he was going to take care of it himself, something to that effect. Sergeant Lank and Detective Kevin Albert were sent out to review the CCTV footage again that Saturday. At this point, Lank spoke to the leasing manager. Her name was Kathleen, since it was brought to his attention that Kathleen had spoken to Sandra in the weeks before her death. Kathleen explained that Sandra confided in her 4 weeks before that she was pregnant and that she was really nervous about telling her boyfriend, who was a cop. Ultimately, she told her she did tell him and he wasn't happy about it and he didn't want her to have the baby. Then Sandra went on to tell Kathleen that they had broken up, and this was about 3 weeks ago. At that point, Kathleen said that Sandra seemed really happy. She was even hoping to get into a bigger unit. Kathleen also provided Sergeant Lank with a record of all of Sandra's recent deliveries. She picked up 2 packages on January 30th, and there were 3 packages from Kohl's that were delivered last week, but she did not pick them up yet. There was also 1 more package that arrived just that day on the 6th, also from Kohl's. Sergeant Lank and Detective Albert and 2 other officers went back into 3307, and they observed a large unopened box containing a baby car seat. It was the same box he saw Sandra carrying on camera, and this was from her aunt Darlene. The crime scene was then processed for more evidence. And just for the record, if you just heard the name Albert, It's another connection in the Karen Reed case. That's Brian Albert's brother, Kevin. Now, this is the only connection this case has to the Albert family themselves that I know of, but there will be more interesting connections between this case and Karen's that are more significant. But this whole time, other detectives have been interviewing everyone who knew Sandra, including her friends, family, coworkers, and there was definitely a lot of reoccurring themes. Now, I'm not going to read these entire interviews in their entirety, not at all, but I'm going to give you a rundown of them. I already told you what her boss said about her being an oversharer, that she seemed off, that she was distracted, she acted like a teen, made people feel uncomfortable, was asking people to loan her money. But no one indicated that she appeared to be in distress or scared, or that she was being mistreated, or had concerns for her safety. Actually, a lot of people mentioned good things, like her boyfriend had brought her coffee and munchkins recently, that she was excited for her pregnancy, she liked her apartment, she planned to announce her pregnancy on Valentine's Day, February 14th, and she told friends she was avoiding certain foods, limiting her caffeine intake, shopping for baby clothes, and planning a baby shower. But there were a handful of people who did mention altercations she had recently with the baby's father, that she kicked him out of her apartment just 2 or 3 weeks ago after a really bad argument. She went to a family Christmas party right before her death, about a week before her death, and she was so excited to plan for a baby shower, but she seemed down because she said that this pregnancy was going to be an uphill battle, since she didn't want the father's current wife to find out. Sandra had also been down lately about her mother dying, because she really wanted her mother to be there when the baby was born. When officers asked one of Sandra's extended family members about the father of the baby, she stated she knew he was a detective, had 2 children of his own, and that his wife was pregnant. She further stated that the father of the baby was a twin, and that Sandra's mother was a twin. So they had discussed the possibility of Sandra having twins. But she said she spoke to Sandra later on, after her ultrasound, and Sandra let her family member know that she was only pregnant with 1 child. However, another friend told detectives that when she spoke to Sandra over Snapchat about a month ago, she told her that she'd been sleeping with the twin brothers and didn't know which one was the father, but they were both cops. She even asked her friend for advice because her friend had a child of her own. And then she gave her friend some more details about why she didn't know who the father was, like the timing that she slept with them. And one was a married cop with a baby on the way. She also mentioned that he made a lot of money and it was an awkward situation. Sandra said that she told the father of the baby how much money he would have to pay her per month once the baby was born. She would be demanding $4,000 per month from the baby's father, plus an additional $3,000 for daycare. And she already picked out a specific daycare center, the Creative World Children's Learning Center in South Easton. But she said the father of the child was in denial and said it's not his. Sandra also said she was going to tell his wife and his job. She was aware that this was going to get him into trouble. The father of the child then got angry, took Sandra's phone from her, and I think this is a time when Sandra texted Matt later saying that she was scared when he took something from her hands, and she thought that he was going to hit her. Sandra also made the comment to a friend that he should leave his wife because he loved her, and that he loves her more than he loves his wife. One other big reoccurring theme was that Sandra had been reaching out to old friends a lot in the last month specifically. There were a number of people who said they met her in elementary school or an old job or a college class, and they hadn't talked to her in a while. Some even said it had been years, and then all of a sudden, she reconnected with them to tell them she was pregnant. So it was kind of odd. I did feel bad because when I read this, I thought of the fact that she had lost everyone she loved. And maybe she was so excited and scared, and she had a lot of things on her mind and no one to truly lean on. Or this could have looked like she was doing this because she was going to commit self-harm. They could have speculated she was saying her goodbyes. Some people reconnect with old friends and loved ones right before they end their lives. Well, Matt's name came up at least one time through her Aunt Darlene, maybe twice with someone else, and that he was a cop that she was dating. But I think with all the information that was provided, it would make sense that detectives by then were putting it together and knew it was Matt Farwell. But remember, this is a different police department. They're just still gathering all of this information. They're not familiar with who he is, but at least they have the name of someone close to Sandra who could have information about her and could help them establish the reason for her death. So on Saturday, February 6th at approximately 3:10 p.m., Trooper Matt Dunne and Sergeant John Fanning interviewed Matt Farwell. His interview took place in a school parking lot, which I thought was ironic, Before I forget, I'm going to tell you the connection between the Karen Reed case briefly right now. Both of these men were also involved in Karen's case. Fanning is Proctor's boss, and Dunne was in possession of the Canton library footage. There were 2 minutes of that footage that went missing from the video. It would have shown her driving that night with her taillight still intact when she left the Alberts' house. There's this gap that's unaccounted for, and Dunne handled that footage. I just wanted to make sure that I pointed this out. Here's a clip of that information.
One Meadows is about a mile from the Canton Library. We know the video equipment was working because they have that footage from 12:16 a.m. But in the video that the prosecution turned over to us, there is a gap in that video from 12:37 a.m. to 12:39 a.m., which would have been the precise time my client would have been driving back past the library. We know that that footage would show that my client's taillight was still intact at that point because she never struck John O'Keefe with her vehicle. Yet the prosecution has produced a video from the library with that crucial time period missing.
But back to the case. When interviewed, Matt said he had heard about Sandra's passing on Friday and that he had known Sandra for about 10 years, going back to when Sandra was a police explorer in Stoughton and Matt was an instructor. He said that Sandra had a troubled life and he felt bad for her, so he would keep tabs on her throughout the years, but she continued to have problems. Wow. Yeah, you were the continued problem all of those years. Ugh, I can't help but comment things like this because I cannot stand people like him, but I will try to hold back. Please comment any of your feelings and thoughts because they probably align with mine. Matt said that sometime early in 2020, he did begin a sexual relationship with Sandra. He said that he was intoxicated one night and he ended up meeting with her and having sex. Liar. Lying so bad right now. He also said that he only had sex with her maybe 2 or 3 times last year. We counted 21 just from the last few months. He said that the last time they had sex was at the end of October 2020, which was another lie. Matt said that sometime in December 2020, Sandra let him know that she was pregnant, and she told him that he was the father. But Matt said he was confident he wasn't because the last time they had sex didn't line up with her due date. Matt was adamant that he was not the father of the unborn child that Sandra was carrying at the time of her death. So, of course, they want to know where he was on Monday, the 1st of February. Matt said that on the evening of Monday, February 1st, 2021, he went to Sandra's apartment in Canton. He said that he asked her if he could come by and she said no problem. Matt said he intended on breaking everything off with Sandra. He told her she was crazy and that the child was not his. He said Sandra told him he was a dick. Matt said he was straightforward in his conversation with her and told her it was all over and he was blocking her from all forms of communication. He said it was a pretty nasty argument, but they weren't too loud. He kept telling Sandra that there was no way he was the father based on her timeline. But he kept calm, and he was trying not to incite a fight. He said Sandra was upset, but she did not make any self-harm statements at all. And when he left, Sandra was standing in the kitchen, and he walked out. When asked when this took place, he said that he arrived around 9:10 p.m. and left around 9:30 p.m. Well, this matches up pretty well with that CCTV footage of the man coming into Sandra's building around that same time frame. Matt told the detectives when he left, he blocked Sandra on all communication platforms, and the last time he's seen Sandra prior to Monday, February 1st was approximately a week before. He said he had been trying to distance himself from her and that she was having sex with other people the entire time they were together. When the detectives asked him whether he knew if Sandra had told anyone that she thought he was the father of the unborn child, he said no. He did not know that Sandra was telling other people that she thought he was the father. When the detectives asked him how many times he had been at her apartment, Matt said he was probably there at her Canton apartment 5 or 6 times and he helped her move in, but he had never had sex with her in the Canton apartment. That was the end of that interview. But then on February 11th, Matt's brother Billy was interviewed. He said the same thing about how he met Sandra a long time ago, and he hadn't been in touch with her until she had questions about the Army. Then they reconnected. He did admit that he had a sexual relationship with her going back about 2 years. That did seem to match up from what I gathered in the documents. But Billy said that in 2020, he'd only been with her maybe 2 or 3 times. Now, I'm not sure about that, but with all the communication, it could have been a lot more. Billy said that the last time they were together was sometime in December of 2020. Sandra then told Billy that she was pregnant and that the father was his brother, Matt. Billy said he knew that his brother did not get her pregnant. Was he there? I'm like thinking, how do you know? Sergeant Fanning met with Matt again, and this time at the district attorney's office. He requested consent from Matt to retrieve all of the data off of his phone relative to the investigation into the self-harm death of Sandra Birchmore. Matt signed this agreement, and Fanning took his phone into possession, and then he gave it to Trooper Nick Guarino. They had his phone extracted, and then Fanning gave the phone back to Matt, who by this time had also lawyered up. But that's not a bad idea when someone this close to you is now deceased. If the name Trooper Nick Guarino sound familiar to you and you watch the Karen Reed trial, he's significant in both of these cases. He's the last person that overlaps in both, so I want to mention it. He was also asked to extract data off of 4 cell phones involved in Karen's case. One's belonging to Karen Reed, John O'Keefe, Jennifer McCabe, and Carrie Roberts. But when he was testifying, he made a really weird comment under his breath. He didn't know that the microphone was picking it up. And this was just before he was asked to read through Karen and John's text messages. I'm going to play it.
You recognize that, sir?
Yes.
And what do you recognize as?
The first page is Facebook Messenger chats between Karen Reed and John O'Keefe.
And what's contained in there, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed from the extraction from Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
Yes, it is.
And specifically with reference to those chats between Mr. O'Keefe and the defendant, you also reviewed that material from the defendant's phone as well?
Yes, I did.
Material that you reviewed from the defendant's phone, is that consistent with what you observed in Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
Yes, it is.
In Karen's case, Guarino was unable to locate all of Jennifer McCabe's deleted phone calls and her suspicious Google searches when he extracted her phone data. When Karen's defense attorney was asked why he thought that was, here's the clip of what he said.
Mr. Jackson, any idea why Nicholas Guarino didn't find Jennifer McCabe's deleted phone calls the first time he looked through the phone?
I have a lot of ideas.
I'm curious about that. Hopefully we find out today.
Now back to Sandra's case. During the time that Matt's phone data was being analyzed, his lawyer Patrick Hanley sent Sergeant Fanning a letter in regard to some unanswered questions that Fanning had regarding Matt's relationship with Sandra. I'm going to read you this letter. It's not long, but I think it's important. Dear Sergeant Fanning, I'm writing to follow up on your recent conversations and prior interviews you had with my client, Matthew Farwell. As you know, Mr. Farwell has been cooperative with your investigation, including participating in interviews with you and permitting you to download certain information from his mobile phone. Throughout your conversations with my client and later with myself, you have indicated that you view him as a witness in your investigation. This is consistent with reality. Mr. Farwell has committed no crime. Like many, he's saddened by Miss Birchmore's death. During our recent conversations, you asked Mr. Farwell to submit a DNA sample and participate in a polygraph interview. Although I appreciate your diligence, I advise my client to decline these requests and the request for further interview, traditional non-polygraph that accompanied them. I did so because they're far outside the norm for mere witnesses in an investigation. I was a prosecutor for 14 years and participated in hundreds of interviews with state police detectives like yourself. I cannot recall once seeking a polygraph interview, and I can only recall seeking DNA of persons that the investigators and I considered targets. There are good reasons for anyone to chafe at a request for DNA and polygraph, and for an attorney to advise his client to decline the request. Compiling Mr. Farwell's DNA profile would be highly invasive. It would yield genetic markers and highly personal health and family information. Based on the information he has already provided to you, that I will not restate here, I expect his DNA profile would reveal nothing of value to your case. Mr. Farwell has already provided highly personal information. In my opinion, providing DNA is a step too far. A polygraph raises similar concerns about invasion of privacy. The topics of questioning would be highly invasive. Furthermore, the results of a polygraph are inadmissible in court because courts have concluded that polygraph results are unreliable. Under the circumstances here, there is no reason for the state police to conduct a polygraph examination of my client. I write not only to explain my response to your request for DNA and polygraph of my client, but also to briefly address 2 points that may be underlying your requests. First, My client had no role in Miss Birchmore's death. He certainly never encouraged her to take her life, nor did he have any reason to fear that she would take her own life. He was shocked and saddened when he learned that she had taken her own life. End of the letter. There is one big redacted portion, but other than that, there's just the closing, and I read it all to you. Did you notice that he used self-harm like 3 times in that letter? Like, he reiterated the fact that, like, you know, she did this to herself. She did this to herself. But the bottom line is, Matt's lawyer wanted no DNA sample taken and no polygraph. I wonder what he was hiding. They also retrieved Matt's work cell phone, and that was supposedly extracted as well. But here's what I thought was interesting. Before anything could have actually been sifted through, because we know there was a lot of it, Sergeant Fanning already made a statement in the investigative reports that he analyzed, whatever that means, both of Matt's phones. And this is what the quote is. Quote, "I did not find any communication with Sandra Birchmore. Matt had said in a previous interview that he deleted all communications with Sandra." End quote. Right. But we all know that doesn't mean there weren't messages just because they weren't on the devices. We know there's thousands of messages, years of messages. They also gave Trooper Nick Guarino Sandra's laptop, which was supposedly analyzed for data collection. However, again, before a report is even done, Fanning makes a statement that, quote, "Sandra's laptop gave me access to approximately 12 months of iMessages, social media content, and other documents and databases. Matt and Sandra had texted thousands of times over the year, as well communication with many other friends and family of Sandra. It was clear, based on the text with Matt, that he and Sandra had a sexual relationship, as he told us in his previous interview. Sandra communicated often with friends and family. It appeared that Sandra had sexual relations with other men in the months leading up to her death. There are no threats of harm by any of these individuals, including Matt." End quote. 12 months. That's it. Did he just skim it or what? Because he found nothing that raised a red flag. Instead, he seemed to say that everything they found corroborated Matt's story. Meanwhile, Sandra's first autopsy was performed. I say first because there's going to be 3. It was done by Dr. Maria Del Mar Capo Martinez. The report noted that Sandra's hyoid bone, a U-shaped bone at the front of the neck, was fractured on the right side, and that she suffered from petechial hemorrhages of the bulbar, and this is the covering of your eyeball that protects the white of your eye, and hemorrhages in the palpebral conjunctivae. This is the mucous membrane that lines the inner surface of the upper and lower eyelid. So, to speak regular English and make it easy, she had those little broken capillaries in her eyes. And additionally, the medical examiner concluded that Sandra had a hemorrhage of her left neck muscle. Ultimately, Sandra's death was ruled self-inflicted asphyxia by hanging, and the doctor also confirmed that she was approximately 8 to 10 weeks pregnant at the time of her death. The autopsy included a toxicology report as well, and the results were negative for all substances except for her antidepressants. I want to make a point that when medical examiners make a ruling, they take into account what investigators have told them. They don't know everything that they know from the interviews and the facts of the case and the context. And you know what the investigators thought, that this was self-inflicted due to a breakup with Matt. However, Sandra's family, her aunt in particular, wasn't convinced. Sandra was planning too many things to just end her life. Sandra's case was quickly ruled as self-harm by the Canton Police and the state police assigned to the county district attorney's office. A lot of this was because of the lack of forensic evidence from Matt's cell phone. According to the report I read from Lieutenant Fanning, Trooper Guarino was given Matt's phone and he was supposed to do a full data extraction. But what was interesting is neither Guarino or Fanning said they found any deleted messages between Sandra and Matt. But because of all the admissions from all the men that had been with Sandra and had connections in law enforcement, an internal affairs investigation began, directed by the Stoughton Police Chief herself, Donna McNamara. This new investigation was also prompted by Sandra's estate and its personal representative, her aunt. They retained a well-known forensic pathologist, Dr. Michael Bodden, to analyze all of the first autopsy findings. And guess what he thought? Well, it was his expert opinion that Sandra's injuries, including the placement of the ligature found on her body, proved she was strangled. The hyoid fracture, along with other injuries, were commonly found in homicidal strangulation, manual and with a ligature, but not in a self-inflicted hanging. Also, autopsy photos showed that the ligature was entangled in Sandra's hair, which occurs when there's resistance during a homicidal strangulation. Bodden said she would have lost consciousness within seconds after the ligature was fastened around her neck, and she would have died within a few minutes. He also noted that the ligature was found tied to a doorknob, which he believed was supposed to give it the appearance of being a self-inflicted hanging. That's a lot to take in. Dr. Bodden also pointed out that swabs from her body, hair, fingernail clippings, and clothing that she was wearing were taken for an assay kit and an analysis, but it appeared to him they were never tested. Why not? Once these findings came out, and of course, the Stoughton Police Department was now being sued in a wrongful death action against Matthew, Robert, and Billy, the chief of police made a statement saying she would be remiss if she did not remark that she viewed the findings from Dr. Bodden and she was profoundly disturbed and troubled by what she read. She understands that she's not a trained medical examiner and she's not qualified to draw any direct conclusions, but the findings warrant a further investigation at the highest level, which means she was getting other agencies involved, internal affairs, and the FBI. At this point, Matt and Robert resign from the Stoughton Police Department. FBI Special Agent Cheney Castrita, who is currently assigned to the Public Corruption and Civil Rights Squad of the FBI's Boston Division, was handling this investigation. She investigates public corruption and civil rights offenses, and she was pivotal in this federal investigation into Sandra's death. And wow, did a lot get uncovered. My eyes were burning reading through all this, and my blood was boiling as well. Most of this you already know because I shared it with you. All the text message exchanges. The fact Matt had relations with Sandra when she was under the age of legal consent, and everything leading up to her death. Except there were a few things we haven't gone over yet. Her last days. I left that until now. At least 3 witnesses disclosed that in the weeks before her death, Sandra told them that Matt was physically violent when they discussed her pregnancy. One of these friends reported that in the weeks prior to Sandra's death, she was over the moon about her pregnancy, and they engaged in FaceTime calls with her even selecting baby clothes. But in January, Sandra told this friend that after telling Matt about the baby, he said that he wished she would just die and he wants nothing to do with the baby. Then he put her in a headlock and grabbed her cell phone from her hand. Her friend told her to distance herself from Matt, given he was dangerous, he was a police officer, and he obviously didn't care about the law. However, her friend was also aware that Sandra appeared to be attached to Matt because he had taken her virginity. A second friend said that approximately 10 days before Sandra's death on January 23rd, they went to Walmart to buy more baby items. Sandra had just had an ultrasound the day before and she was really excited about the baby. She even asked her friend to be the child's godmother. During this outing, Sandra told this friend that the day prior, Matt had gotten so angry with her after showing him a fetal sonogram that according to her, Matt told her, "That's not my child. I don't want anything to do with you." Then he pushed her to the ground. Sandra's friend told her to end the relationship with Matt, but Sandra seemed scared, but not ready to leave Matt yet because he had been such a big part of her life for so many years. Additionally, Sandra's longtime therapist that I mentioned before reported that in the weeks before her death, she told her that Matt got upset about the impending pregnancy and shoved her. There was one more friend who came forward to say that on January 10th, Sandra sent a text message indicating that she had recently argued with Matt and that he took her cell phone out of her hand 3 times and refused to give it back to her. Then he took her computer out of her hand and he used his body to shove her. During the month of January, the pressure on Matt increased as a result of this pregnancy. Whenever Sandra tried to communicate with him regarding things like her due date, ultrasounds, genetic testing, gender reveals, and doctor's appointments, his texts were unresponsive or dismissive of those topics, or he just ignored them altogether. On January 4th, she had told Matt she was going to the doctor the next day and asked if he wanted to know how the appointment went. He didn't directly respond to that question. And then on January 5th, she asked him to come over so they could discuss her estimated due date, the week of her ultrasound, her conversation with her doctor, and her first appointment. And again, he did not respond directly to that request either. I already told you about January 20th, when Matt found out that Sandra's friend outed him when she called the police station. Well, just days later, on January 24th, it was approximately 1 week prior to her death, Sandra texted a friend about Matt. This is what she said. Sandra: so the father came by last night. It was like a complete 360 change. Friend: 180 question mark? Sandra: yeah, LOL. Friend: good or bad? Sandra: good, but unexpected. So it kind of threw me off and made me a little uncomfortable, but that's because of how things were going. He asked me if I'd give him a key and said that if I keep it a secret, he'll be around and see them and all that. So it's somewhere. Then he looked in my closet and then the bathroom, but I don't know why. Haven't figured that out. We started to have a heart-to-heart. Then work called him, so we had to leave. Oh, and he brought me a ginger ale because I ran out. Friend: what about the birth certificate? Sandra: I think he's signing it. Not sure. He's coming back again this week. But it was like a complete 180 from where we were at. End of the thread. I think we know what Matt was doing, and it's sick, but we'll get to that in a moment. The special agent said that the shift in Matt's demeanor on or about this date was his attempt to appease Sandra until he could kill her. The following evidence proved that. Matt requested a key and the passcode to enter Sandra's building after he told her months before this he didn't want a key. On January 24th, Sandra texted Matt the passcode and she said, I have your key too when you want it. And records from Walmart show that Sandra did in fact pay approximately $2 to have a key copied at 11:10 a.m. that morning. In a conversation with yet another friend that same day, she said she was surprised that he was now requesting a key to her apartment. The conversation went like this. Friend: did it go good with him? Sandra: I got hit with a shocker question. Can I call you? So it went surprisingly well. He asked if he could have a key and that he'd be around as long as I kept it a secret and don't tell anybody. But he did admit that I do have the upper hand in this situation, which isn't a good thing, but I'm trying not to be that person if you know what I mean. Friend: I get it. Are you going to give him a key? Sandra: I just made a copy of it. Yeah. Friend: that's good. Sandra: I'm not going to give it to him yet, but he also brought me a ginger ale last night like I asked him to. Friend: he's coming around. Sandra: a lot more than I thought he was going to, yes. I still have to verify the PIN for him to get into the apartment if he rings me and I don't answer. But like last night, he opened my closet door for something, and then he went in my bathroom looking at my bathroom, and then I have a dolly in my living room that he asked me why I had it. It was just really odd he started looking around. I don't know. That's weird. Friend: yeah, it was really weird. End of thread. It's not just weird. It's obvious now that Matt was examining her apartment to try to see if he could utilize anything there to kill her so that he didn't have to bring anything with him. It's sad. And it's sad that she had this feeling like she was like, I don't know why he's doing that, because why would he be doing that? But at that point, he didn't care, did he? He didn't care what she thought because he knew what he was going to do. According to text messages between Matt and Sandra just 2 days before her death, she continued to ask him about planning for the birth of their child. On January 30th, Sandra asked him if she could tell him the baby names that she was considering. Like all the other times, he told her that would be a topic they had to discuss in person. Here are the other reasons that the self-harm theory doesn't make any sense. Leading up to February 1st, Sandra planned important baby-related events, such as who would take care of her cats when she went into labor. She ordered more baby items, and she conducted Google searches related to her pregnancy and her future child-rearing decisions. She also planned to have newborn photos taken, an official pregnancy announcement made, which she planned to do on Valentine's Day, as well as a gender reveal. She also made plans for her more immediate future, scheduling an OBGYN appointment for February 10th, asking Matt to help her shovel out her car during the impending snowstorm. You don't do all that if you plan on sleeping forever. Something the special agent mentioned that I thought was very important to note was that Sandra loved her cats. Remember, she was worried about them, who would watch them if she just went to work. Her cats were present when her body was found, which indicated to the special agent she did not make any plans for her pets, which would be inconsistent with the care that she had for them. If she planned to end her life, she would have certainly found them a new home first. If only those poor cats could talk. There was also evidence that Sandra had been taking classes preparing to apply for nursing school. On January 29th, Matt asked Sandra if the code that she gave him was just a general code for the entire building to get in, or if it was a special one assigned just to her. She let him know it was a general one. January 31st, Sandra saw her therapist. During the session, she was screened for depression, and any indications that she may be thinking about self-harm, and her therapist concluded there were no signs of either. Now I'm going to go over Sandra's last day alive in chronological order. On February 1st, 2021, she went to work in the morning, and then at 12:19 p.m., she texted Matt, telling him that she was going to be released early at 12:35 p.m. from her job at the school. Matt told her that he would not be in the area that day. When she returned home, she used her computer to buy baby items. At 1:25 p.m., she's booking that OBGYN appointment and doing loads of laundry. 1:31 p.m., she's booking the newborn photo shoot. Later that afternoon, she told Matt that she received an early gift in the mail and that she was not planning to have a baby shower until late March because of the then ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. She told him that once she learned whether they were having a boy or girl, she wanted him to purchase clothes for the child to wear when they came home from the hospital. Then at 5:31 p.m., she briefly goes outside and returns with a snow brush at 5:33 p.m. The last time Sandra is seen alive on video is February 1st, 2021 at 5:33 p.m., but she was still alive inside her apartment after that. At 7:57 p.m., Sandra texted a friend to get some baby clothes from her. At 8:25 p.m., she performed a Google search for Cubby Kids furniture. At 9:00 p.m., Sandra spoke to one of her coworkers on the phone, and then 3 minutes later at 9:03 p.m., she sent a message via Snapchat to another coworker asking about a work schedule. But finally, at 9:08 p.m., Matt sent her a text asking whether he could come by for a second. At 9:10 p.m., Sandra sent Matt a text back indicating that when he arrived, her apartment door would be open for him. This is the last known outgoing message sent from Sandra's cell phone. We know that Matt is caught on camera thereafter at 9:14. But a minute before this, Sandra's phone was locked. And what's also very interesting to me anyway, is the way he was dressed when he came over. The special agent interviewed multiple witnesses, and each of them indicated that Matt never wore a mask during the pandemic. One of the witnesses stated that he only wore one when it was required, and it was department policy to do so. Yet here he is, casually coming over, wearing a mask at Sandra's? A mask that's covering his face. Why? If he was truly only going over there to talk to her and end the relationship and not kill her, why would he need to disguise himself? But what's really eerie is that at 9:18 p.m., when Matt was most likely already up in Sandra's apartment since he got to the elevator at 9:15, and it probably only takes a couple minutes to get inside, Sandra's phone recorded a screenshot of a black screen while it was still locked. It was never stated in any of the reports what this could have been, but I thought it could have been Matt catching her off guard. If Sandra had her phone in her hand, the buttons could have been pressed as soon as he came in and quickly attempted to subdue her. We know he was only there for 28 minutes, so he acted fast. At 9:28, the coworker replied to Sandra via Snapchat, but she never opened the message, which was not like her, especially because she had asked them a question. And then at 9:40, Sandra's phone registered 8 steps. This was the last movement on her phone, and it was while Matt was still in the apartment. Just 3 minutes later, he's seen leaving her building. She would have already been dead, especially according to Dr. Bodden, remember? Clearly, those steps were not Sandra. This was Matt staging the scene and placing her phone next to her body as though she put it there right before she placed the strap of that duffel bag around her neck. This would have made it look like she wasn't in danger since she could just reach for her phone. It was right there. But it most likely wasn't in reach because he took it from her like he had done on previous occasions, this time so she wouldn't be able to call for help. After sending a final text message to Matt to tell him the door was unlocked, Sandra's phone locked and was never unlocked until after the device was recovered by police, at which point it had already died because it lost battery. And guess what Matt did after leaving Sandra's apartment? He drove to Newton Wellesley Hospital. This is located in a wealthy suburb about 12 miles outside of Boston. And guess why he was there? Because his wife Michelle was having their baby. Yeah. Michelle gave birth to their son on February 2nd, 2021 at 9:25 a.m. So if you're thinking that it's a mere coincidence that Matt killed Sandra on that night, it's not. He knew that he was going to do it close to Michelle's due date. He had to get rid of Sandra before she messed things up in his marriage, in his career, and in his life, because it's always been all about him. The investigation also proved that Matt lied to detectives about it not being plausible that he was the father of Sandra's unborn baby, because he said the last intercourse was in October. This statement was a complete lie. A text exchange from November 18th, 2020 proves otherwise. It went like this. Matt, I'm going to try for tonight. I've been in interviews all day from the murder. Sorry. Sandra, exciting. Okay, I'm running to the store and doing something for you then. I hope you can come. Matt, what are you doing for me? Sandra, LOL, shaving. Are you planning on rolling me over? I need to know what you want if you come. Matt, if you want me to roll you, would you want me to use a condom if I roll you? Sandra, I don't have any LOL. I never picked any up. Do you want me to just take what you do or try and say no? I know being told no is your favorite. Matt, say no. Sandra, winky face emoji. I can do that. End of the thread. And I'm sorry, I'm not aware of what she's referring to here. I was assuming rolling her over meant like the back entrance, you tell me. But 21 minutes later, Matt told Sandra that he was at her apartment, and a text after this indicated that she let him in. Then approximately 25 minutes later, Sandra is texting him, asking him whether he enjoyed the vaginal sex with her again. And he responded, yeah. So I guess it wasn't the back entrance, but anyway, tell me if you know what roll her means. Either way, we know he's lying to police. The baby was his. He knew it. And he also tried to make Sandra look crazy, saying that he was trying to distance himself, pointing out that time when her family member had that well-being check done on her. She was released, and then afterward, she was just texting him right away, saying, sorry if I worried you. And you know what he said at that moment? That he wasn't worried, because he knew she wasn't going to take her life. Also, after Sandra's death, Matt Googled a couple things that were kind of incriminating. He Googled, quote, can deleted iMessages be recovered by Celebrate, end quote, and, quote, can you revoke consent in Massachusetts, end quote. Then he deleted those searches. And I almost forgot to mention this. I wanted to tell you what was found in his iCloud. There were several memes that Matt thought were funny, and he saved them. And these memes indicated his interest in intercourse with dead bodies. One of the memes states, what does a pulse and an orgasm have in common? I don't care if she has either. Disgusting. Another meme said, if you F a corpse on a waterbed, it feels like they're participating. Then there's one glorifying a person who is killed and then violated that no one will miss. There's also a meme showing his interest in violence, especially the sexual type. It's a photo of a woman with tape over her mouth, and it states duct tape, turning no, no, no into since 1942. Where do you even find stuff like that? It's so weird. He also had images that could reveal his interest in strangulation. For example, there was one image where it said, choke me, daddy, and you get carried away, and now she's dead. There was also a screenshot of an image of a woman saying that she couldn't sleep, followed by a man choking her saying, good night, bitch. And finally, one of the other reasons that this self-harm theory doesn't make sense is because when Sandra's family members were cleaning her apartment, they found her favorite necklace lying on the floor of her bedroom. This necklace consisted of a thin gold chain with a pink flamingo charm on it. The family members observed that the necklace's chain was broken, but not where the clasp was. And there was also a large clump of her hair on the chain. And the crime scene photos show that while the strap was still around Sandra's neck, the necklace was broken and hanging from the left side of her neck. The necklace's flamingo charm was on the right side of Sandra's abdomen. And finally, as part of this investigation, the government retained Dr. William Smock as an expert to independently review the crime scene photos, the autopsy photos, and the initial medical examiner's autopsy report. He has over 40 years of experience in the forensic evaluation of injuries, crime scenes, the forensic evaluation and construction of wounds, including asphyxiation-related deaths. Dr. Smock concluded that the fracture of the right superior horn of Sandra's hyoid bone was not consistent with the position she was in when first responders found her, the sitting position. A sitting hanging is called an incomplete hanging, meaning only partial body weight is applied to the neck ligature. Dr. Smock's review of hundreds of cases of hangings in forensic medical literature found no reported cases of hyoid bone fractures in seated women. Fractures of the hyoid bone are more commonly seen in strangulations and in full body weight hangings, not seated ones. Secondly, there were 2 marks on her body that did not add up to it being self-inflicted. Instead, it looked like they were due to force. One was on the upper right portion of her chest. The pattern was consistent with the buckle that was from that strap being forced downward into her chest, and it showed that someone else had done that. There was also an imprint just below her right ear, so the same side, and again, it was from the buckle. And this imprint showed that the strap had been moved and then forced down. In the crime scene photos that were observed by Dr. Smock, there was also skin missing from the upper and lower portions of her nose, and what this indicated was that this was consistent with cases of suffocation when a person's trying to move their head back and forth to breathe. I could not believe that anyone could have ruled this self-inflicted, especially not with all the facts that we have, all the messages, had they found those, right? Dr. Smock also believed that the broken necklace indicated a struggle. So now 2 doctors were going against Sandra's death being ruled anything but a homicide. Some say that this was all a cover-up by the Canton Police Department because a cop was involved. Actually, cops, plural. Even though this isn't the same agency, they're not from the same department, it's bro code. This and the Karen Reed case were out of the same department, and it casted a spotlight on the relationship between police officers and prosecutors. Both of these cases seem to involve investigative missteps. Matt and Sandra exchanged over 32,000 messages just between December 2019 and her death. Yet Trooper Guarino missed these somehow? And when it comes to Karen Reed's case, just recently during a hearing, her defense attorney, David Yannetti, said he was told that the district attorney, Michael Morrissey, who also worked on Sandra's case, was the focus of an ongoing federal investigation for the way that Karen's case was handled. But then, of course, a spokesperson from the government argued that that wasn't true. However, Yannetti referred to at least 8 letters that were exchanged between Morrissey's office and the federal U.S. Attorney's Office. The prosecutor in Karen's case, Adam Lally, then filed a protective order to seal those 8 documents from being released publicly. Why? Who knows? Could it be plausible that there is corruption between cops and prosecutors? Sure. Between the law on the streets, the cops, and the law in the courtroom, the attorneys? Of course. Did it happen in these 2 cases? I don't know. But there were a lot of discrepancies and questions. But either way, Matthew Farwell was indicted just last month on August 27th, 2024. His charges are killing a victim or a witness and staging it to look like she took her own life. It states that Matthew Farwell did kill Sandra Birchmore with malice aforethought, deliberately, maliciously, with premeditation, and with the intent to prevent her from speaking up about his crimes. Matt was arrested on August 28th by a SWAT team. He faces a mandatory sentence of life in prison if found guilty, and possibly the death penalty. It's a federal case, so even though Massachusetts doesn't have the death penalty, he's still eligible because federal courts do. Matt pleaded not guilty during his arraignment.
Sandra Birchmore, I was a young woman that idolized policing and what it's supposed to stand for in society. She saw none of that in the way she was treated by Matthew Farwell. Sandra is on my mind today, as well as her family, and what they have gone through. I'd like to thank the dedicated leaders and investigators with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office for their detailed and tireless work on this matter. I'd like to thank the men and women of the Stoughton Police Department for the hard work and dedication they give to the Stoughton community each and every day that are there today doing just that. This is a horrible situation. I said this 3 years ago when it happened. I said it 2 years ago in a news conference. This is a horrific situation. Sandra Birchmore received no justice in life. Immediately after her death, an internal affairs investigation was opened up by my department, and we worked tirelessly in that investigation. An internal affairs investigation does not hold the same weight as a criminal investigation, and what we discovered during that investigation was turned over to other agencies, and you have seen some of that here today. I cannot comment on the investigation that the FBI is ongoing, as you are well aware. But today, Sandra Birchmore, in this case, is one step closer to justice.
And this case is still ongoing, so I'm sure there will be updates. I don't think I'll be doing any of them. I don't know. Tell me your thoughts. Do you want me to continue doing current cases or just stick to solved ones? Let me know. But I want to end with Sandra. She is the important person in this case. And one of her friends named Andrea wrote this on a memorial page, and I want to end with it. She said, "I think of you constantly and still wonder what happened. You were a character. The thickest layer of who you were was brimming with kindness, generosity, and selflessness. Sandra, you were too irrationally giving sometimes, offering to watch my children and assist them with their schoolwork without pay. Even when I explained that I leave home at 7 a.m., I would never have allowed anyone to do that for me. You would be the first person to contact me if I was upset, but you never cried on my shoulder, always dramatically explaining away your issues with strong, aggressive sarcasm. Sure, you were pretty crazy, overly dramatic, and inappropriately honest and open with just about anything, but you always made me laugh. You talked incessantly about the past and all that was unfair, unjust, and wrong, but could be sure to notice how you negatively contributed to those situations. The way that you could retell stories and laugh at yourself was so amusing. Above all, you shared everything with those you cared about. Time, feeling, comfort, and loyal friendship. I wish I had just one more meeting with you. It kills me to recall how I declined get-togethers. Through your loss, I realize we need to make it work and find a way, because we can never predict with certainty whether or not we'll be waking up to another day. I will never forget the 7th grade Sandra or the adult Sandra that you were developing into. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for making me feel special and loved. I'll miss our random check-ins. I love you, my friend." And now I just want to give my final word. Sandra deserves justice. And as a mom, I hope she gets it, because she didn't deserve any of this. Like all of us, all she wanted was to be loved. Please share this video so that more people will see it. Share it with someone you believe it will help. And thank you so much for being here and giving Sandra your time. I'll see you in my next video.